The sapphire necklace worth $3 million disappeared during the busiest dinner service of the year, and every eye in the room turned toward the one person who had nothing left to lose, the quiet waitress who'd just humiliated San Francisco's most dangerous billionaire in front of the entire city's elite. But before security could lay a hand on her, she did something no one expected. She smiled. If you want to see how a woman with empty pockets brought down an empire built on lies, stay until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain hit San Francisco like it had a personal grudge. Ethan Caldwell stood outside the Velvet Harbor, watching water beat off the burgundy awning while his driver waited with the engine running. He didn't need to be here. Didn't need another overpriced steak, another conversation with people who measured friendship in stock portfolios and summer homes. But his assistant had made the reservation weeks ago, back when he thought taking a night away from spreadsheets and bedtime stories might do him some good. Now, standing in the October cold with rain soaking through his $2,000 shoes, he wasn't so sure. "Mr. Caldwell?" Marcus, his driver, cracked the window. "We can go somewhere else. That Italian place on—" "It's fine." Ethan straightened his tie, a charcoal gray thing his daughter had picked out that morning because it matched his eyes. At least that's what Sophie had said, standing on her step stool in his closet, drowning in one of his old Stanford sweatshirts. The memory made his chest tight. "I won't be long." The hostess recognized him the moment he walked through the door. Of course she did. Everyone in this city knew Ethan Caldwell, or thought they did. The founder of Caldwell Properties, the man who'd turned a bankrupt construction company into a billion-dollar empire before his 30th birthday. The widower who never talked about his late wife. The father who left fundraisers early to make it home for bedtime. They knew the headlines. They didn't know shit about the man. "Mr. Caldwell, such a pleasure." The hostess, a severe woman with the kind of posture that suggested military school or ballet, gestured toward the dining room. "Your usual table?" "Actually, I'd prefer something quieter. By the window, if you have it." Her smile flickered. The window tables were for tourists and people who needed to see and be seen. Men like Ethan Caldwell sat at the center tables where deals were made and reputations were forged. But she recovered quickly, professional to her bones. "Of course, right this way." The Velvet Harbor lived up to its name. Everything was deep reds and soft golds, crystal chandeliers throwing light across white tablecloths and faces that had been lifted, tucked, and injected into permanent expressions of vague satisfaction. Old money sat next to new money, sat next to people who'd mortgaged their futures for one night of feeling like they belonged. Ethan hated it, came here anyway. He was scanning the wine list, a leather-bound monstrosity that weighed more than his daughter, when he heard the voice. "I'm terribly sorry, but we're completely booked for the evening." Polite, gentle. The kind of voice that had been trained to absorb impact without breaking. Ethan glanced up. The waitress stood 3 tables away, hands clasped in front of her, while a man in a suit that probably cost more than she made in 6 months leaned back in his chair, swirling scotch like he was contemplating philosophy. "Booked." The man, late 50s, soft around the middle, wedding ring catching the light, let the word hang there. "Sweetheart, do you know who I am?" "Yes, Mr. Pemberton, you've been a valued guest." "Then you understand that when I ask for the Dover Sole, which I have ordered here every Thursday for the past 8 years, I expect to receive the Dover Sole." He took a drink. Not excuses. The waitress, her name tag read Lena, kept her expression neutral, but Ethan caught the slight tension in her jaw. "The kitchen apologizes for the inconvenience. Chef Marcus can prepare the halibut in the same style." Or, "I don't want the fucking halibut." The tables around them went quiet. Not silent. People here were too practiced for that. But conversation shifted, dimmed, attention turned. Lena didn't flinch. "I understand your frustration, Mr. Pemberton. I'll speak with the chef personally and see what alternatives—" "What I'm frustrated with," Pemberton said, loud enough now that pretending not to listen became impossible, "is the declining quality of service in this establishment. First the hostess seats us 20 minutes late, now this. Tell me, dear, what exactly do they pay you for?" Something crossed Lena's face then. Not anger, at least not the obvious kind. Something older, more tired. The look of someone who'd heard this speech before, in different words from different mouths. "I'll get the manager," she said quietly. "You do that." Pemberton turned back to his companion, a younger woman who'd spent the entire exchange studying her phone. Absolutely ridiculous. Lena walked past Ethan's table, moving with the kind of careful control that suggested she was holding something fragile. Or maybe she was the fragile thing, and the control was all that kept her from shattering. Their eyes met for half a second. Then she was gone, disappearing through the swinging kitchen doors. Ethan found himself staring after her. "Your server will be right with you, Mr. Caldwell." He blinked. The hostess stood beside his table, water glass already filled, bread basket perfectly arranged. He didn't remember her approaching. "That waitress," Ethan said. "Lena. She works here often." The hostess's expression flickered. Surprise, then calculation. "Miss Brooks has been with us for about 8 months. Is there a problem?" "No, no problem." But he kept watching the kitchen doors. Lena Brooks stood in the narrow corridor between the kitchen and the dining room, pressing her palms against the cool tile wall and counting backward from 10, a technique her therapist had taught her back when she could afford a therapist. 10, 9, 8. Mr. Pemberton was an asshole. This was not news. Mr. Pemberton had been an asshole last week when he'd snapped his fingers at her like she was a dog. Had been an asshole the week before when he'd sent back a perfectly good steak because it was looking at him funny. Would be an asshole next week when he came back and pretended nothing had happened. 7, 6, 5. The kitchen door swung open and Marcus, not the chef, the line cook who covered when Chef Marcus was on break, stuck his head out. "You good?" "Fine." "Pemberton's a dick." "I'm aware." Lena pushed off the wall, smoothed down her apron. "Tell me we actually ran out of Dover sole, or if Gerald just didn't feel like preparing it." Marcus had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Between you and me, Gerald didn't feel like it. Gerald's having a day." "We're all having a day, Marcus." But she said it without heat. Gerald had worked here for 15 years, had a sick kid at home, a wife who'd left him for a personal trainer named Brett. Everyone was fighting something. 4, 3, 2. "I'll handle it," Lena said. She pushed back through the doors into the controlled chaos of the dining room, scanning for the manager and finding him exactly where she expected, at table 12, laughing at something Richard Vasquez had said. Richard Vasquez, who owned half the tech startups in Silicon Valley and tipped in stock options. The manager wouldn't leave that table for Dover's soul and wounded pride. Lena changed course, heading back toward Pemberton's table, already constructing the apology in her head. Professional, sincere. Just vague enough that she wasn't actually lying. She made it 3 steps before she saw her. Vanessa Laurent sat at the corner table like she owned it, which, given the rumors about her family's stake in the restaurant group, maybe she did. 28 years old and already a legend in certain circles. The kind of woman who wore diamonds to breakfast and made grown men stutter. Tonight she wore black. Simple, elegant, probably cost more than Lena's car. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves over one shoulder, and when she laughed at something her companion said, people turned to look. They always looked at Vanessa Laurent. Lena had been working at the Velvet Harbor for 8 months and had served Vanessa exactly twice. The first time Vanessa had been polite in that distant way rich people were polite to service workers. Pleasant, generous with tips, utterly forgettable. The second time, 3 weeks ago, Vanessa had sent back her wine because the glass had a water spot. There hadn't been a water spot. Tonight, Vanessa's eyes tracked across the room and landed on Lena with the precision of a predator spotting movement in tall grass. Lena looked away first. She made it back to Pemberton's table, delivered the news about the halibut, rejected, offered the Chilean sea bass, also rejected, and finally suggested the chef's special lamb preparation, accepted with the air of a man granting pardon to a condemned prisoner. When she turned around, Vanessa was watching her again. Ethan ordered the steak medium rare and spent the next 20 minutes pretending to read emails on his phone while actually watching the dining room. He told himself he was people watching, told himself he was decompressing, letting his mind wander before heading home to Sophie and whatever crisis her nanny had texted him about this time. Last week it had been a science experiment involving his electric toothbrush and a fishbowl. The week before, Sophie had decided to give herself bangs with kitchen scissors. He wasn't watching Lena Brooks, except he absolutely was. She moved through the dining room like water finding paths around stones. Efficient, graceful, somehow there exactly when needed and invisible when she wasn't. She smiled at the right times, laughed at jokes that probably weren't funny, diffused tension with practiced ease, and she was good at it. That was the thing Ethan couldn't quite reconcile. She was genuinely remarkably good at reading people. He saw her pause at a table of college kids who were clearly overwhelmed by the menu, watched her guide them towards something affordable without making them feel poor. Saw her refill a woman's water glass 30 seconds before the woman reached for it, already moving to the next table. Saw her deflect a drunk banker's wandering hands with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and a step backward that looked accidental. She was a waitress, the way a chess master was a board game enthusiast. The steak arrived, perfect, as expected, and Ethan ate without tasting it, his attention still drifting. That's when things went sideways. It started quietly. A raised voice from the corner table, quickly muffled. Ethan glanced over and saw Vanessa Laurent leaning forward, speaking in rapid, angry whispers to her server, a young guy who looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. The server said something. Vanessa's expression went cold. Then she stood up, her chair scraping against the floor with enough force that conversation stuttered and died. "Excuse me," Vanessa's voice carried across the dining room like a knife through silk. "Could I have everyone's attention for just a moment?" The room went absolutely silent. Ethan set down his fork. Vanessa smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made the hair on his neck stand up. "I hate to interrupt everyone's lovely evening, but I seem to have a small problem. You see, I came here tonight wearing a sapphire necklace, a gift from my late grandmother, worth approximately $3 million. She paused, let that number settle. "And now it's missing." Someone gasped. Ethan thought it might have been genuine. "Now I'm quite certain I had it when I arrived," Vanessa continued, her voice sweet as poison. "And I'm quite certain I had it when I sat down. But somewhere between the appetizers and the entree it seems to have vanished." Her gaze swept the room, pausing on faces, assessing reactions. "I'd hate to think that someone in this establishment might have taken advantage of the situation." The manager materialized from somewhere, moving fast. "Miss Laurent, I assure you, I'm not accusing anyone." Vanessa held up a hand. "Yet, I simply think it would be prudent to check, for everyone's peace of mind." Translation: I'm absolutely accusing someone, and we're all going to play along. Ethan watched it unfold with the sick fascination of witnessing a car accident in slow motion, the manager stammering reassurances, security guards appearing from the wings, diners shifting in their seats, caught between outrage and excitement. And then Vanessa's gaze landed on Lena Brooks. "You," Vanessa said softly. "You were at my table earlier, weren't you?" Lena stood near the kitchen doors, water pitcher in hand, her face gone carefully blank. "Yes, Miss Laurent. I brought your appetizer and refilled your wine. And you were the only person who came close enough to—" Vanessa let the sentence hang, incomplete but devastating. The room held its breath. Lena set down the pitcher with steady hands. "I didn't touch your necklace, Miss Laurent." "I'm not saying you did." Vanessa's smile widened. "I'm simply saying you had opportunity. And I think, given the value of what's missing, it would be reasonable to ask you to empty your pockets, just to clear the air." The silence after that was different, heavier. The kind of silence that pressed down on a person, demanded choices. Ethan saw the calculation flash across Lena's face, the weighing of options, the measuring of consequences. Saw her glance toward the manager, who was already nodding, already moving toward her with security in tow. She could refuse, could make a scene, demand a lawyer, walk out. But they both knew what that would look like, what people would assume. "Of course," Lena said quietly, "if it helps." And Ethan watched this woman, this stranger who'd done nothing but serve overpriced food to ungrateful assholes all night, prepare to let them humiliate her in front of a room full of people who wouldn't remember her name tomorrow. Something in his chest twisted. He pushed back from his table and stood up. Every eye in the room turned toward him. Vanessa's smile faltered, just for a second, just enough to see the surprise beneath the performance. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the silence like he was opening a board meeting. "But I don't think that's necessary." The manager blinked at him. "Mr. Caldwell, I appreciate your concern, but no." Ethan walked toward them, hands loose at his sides, his heart hammering against his ribs in a way it hadn't since Sophie's birth. I don't think you do, because if you did, you'd realize what you're actually suggesting. Vanessa recovered quickly. Mr. Caldwell, I didn't realize you were here tonight. I certainly didn't mean to disrupt your dinner. And yet, he stopped a few feet from Lena, close enough to see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself like she was bracing for impact. Here we are. I'm simply trying to recover stolen property. Are you? Ethan looked at her, really looked, the way he looked at contractors who lied about budgets and investors who inflated projections. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're accusing a woman of theft with zero evidence beyond proximity, which, if we're being honest, would implicate half the staff and most of your dining companions. Color rose in Vanessa's cheeks. I have every right to... You have the right to file a police report, to have actual authorities conduct an actual investigation. What you don't have is the right to stage a public humiliation because you lost a necklace. I didn't lose it. It was stolen. Prove it. The words came out harder than Ethan intended, sharp enough that Vanessa actually took a step back. The manager cleared his throat. Mr. Caldwell, perhaps we could discuss this in my office. I don't think Miss Brooks should have to prove her innocence, Ethan said, still looking at Vanessa. That's not how this works. You make the accusation, you provide the evidence. Vanessa's expression went arctic. I wasn't aware you were an attorney, Mr. Caldwell. I'm not. I'm just someone who knows what it looks like when powerful people abuse that power because they can. Silence. Then from beside him, Lena spoke. It's all right. Her voice was steady, almost gentle. I don't mind. Really. Ethan turned to look at her, and for the first time all night, their eyes met properly. Hers were brown, warm brown, the color of honey held up to sunlight, and completely, utterly calm. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. I know. The smallest smile touched her lips. But thank you. She turned to the manager, started pulling items from her apron pockets. A notepad, 2 pens, a handful of wrapped mints. The detritus of a shift spent anticipating other people's needs. No sapphire necklace. Vanessa watched with narrowed eyes, her jaw tight. The manager checked Lena's pockets himself, professionally, quickly, and found nothing. He even checked her shoes, which would have been funny if it wasn't so degrading. I'm sorry, Miss Laurent, the manager said finally, but there's nothing here. Then she hid it somewhere. Vanessa's voice had gone sharp, the polish cracking. Check the kitchen, check the bathrooms, check... Or maybe you should check your own bag. Everyone turned. Lena stood with her hands clasped in front of her, her expression still that careful neutral. But something had shifted in her eyes, something hard and bright. Excuse me? Vanessa's voice could have cut glass. Your bag, Lena repeated. The black clutch you set on the table when you arrived. The one you kept opening and closing during dinner, I noticed because the clasp was sticking. She tilted her head slightly. Did you check inside? Vanessa went very still. Are you suggesting? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying that before we tear apart the kitchen and interrogate the entire staff, maybe you should verify that the necklace is actually missing and not just misplaced. The silence that followed was different, electric. Vanessa stared at Lena like she was seeing her for the first time. Then, with movements that looked like they cost her, she reached for her clutch, opened it, reached inside, and pulled out a sapphire necklace that caught the light and threw it back in brilliant, damning blue. The room erupted. Not in sound, these people were too well bred for that, but in movement. Heads turning, phones appearing, whispers spreading like wildfire. Vanessa stood frozen, the necklace dangling from her fingers, her face cycling through emotions too fast to track. Shock, confusion. And then, as realization settled in, something that looked a lot like fear. I don't... She looked at the necklace like it had materialized from thin air. This isn't... I checked before. It wasn't... But nobody was listening anymore. The damage was done. The story already writing itself in real time across text messages and social media posts. Vanessa Laurent had accused a waitress of theft, had demanded a public search, and the necklace had been in her bag the whole time. The manager was apologizing to Lena, words spilling out too fast. The security guards were retreating. Diners were turning back to their meals, already composing the versions they'd tell at tomorrow's brunches. And Vanessa. Vanessa was staring at Lena with an expression that made Ethan's instincts scream warnings. "You did this," Vanessa said quietly, just loud enough for Ethan and Lena to hear. "Somehow, I did nothing but my job, Miss Laurent." Lena's voice remained gentle, but there was steel underneath now. Steel and something else, something that looked like satisfaction. "I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening." She turned and walked away, back through the swinging kitchen doors, leaving Vanessa standing there with her grandmother's necklace and the ruins of her reputation. Ethan realized he was smiling. He left the Velvet Harbor 20 minutes later without finishing his steak, tipped the waiter 40%, and asked the hostess to pass along his compliments to Lena Brooks. In the car, Marcus asked if everything was all right. "Fine," Ethan said, watching the rain-slicked streets slide past. Actually, better than fine. He couldn't stop thinking about the look in Lena's eyes when she'd suggested Vanessa check her bag. That calm, quiet certainty. Like she'd known exactly where the necklace was. Like she'd known because she'd put it there herself, which was impossible, obviously. Ethan had watched her the whole time. She'd never been close enough to Vanessa's table to slip anything into that clutch, except for those few seconds when she'd refilled the wine, when Vanessa had been looking at her companion, when the entire room had been focused on their own conversations and expensive meals. It would have taken incredible timing, incredible nerve, incredible stupidity, because if she'd been caught, but she hadn't been caught, because she'd known exactly when Vanessa checked her bag, had counted on that public accusation, had let herself become the villain just long enough to flip the script. Ethan found himself laughing. "Sir?" Marcus glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Nothing, just..." He shook his head. "Take me home, Marcus. I need to read my daughter a bedtime story." But later that night, after Sophie had fallen asleep clutching her stuffed elephant, and Ethan sat in his study with a glass of whiskey. He wasn't drinking. He found himself searching for information about the Velvet Harbor's staff. It took 3 searches and a call to his assistant before he found anything. Lena Brooks, 30 years old, previously employed as an archivist at the San Francisco Historical Society before the position was eliminated due to budget cuts 18 months ago. An archivist, someone who spent their days tracking down obscure details, following paper trails, piecing together stories from fragments, someone who knew how to research. Ethan pulled up another search window and typed, "Vanessa Laurent background." The results were exactly what he expected. Born to the Laurent family, old money stretching back 5 generations. Education at exclusive boarding schools, a brief stint at Parsons, then a comfortable life funded by trust funds and her father's real estate investments. He scrolled deeper, past the society pages and charity galas. Found a gap. Nothing before age 18, no childhood photos, no school records, no trace of young Vanessa anywhere, which wasn't unusual for private families. Except the Laurents weren't that private. Vanessa's parents appeared in dozens of photos from the 90s and early 2000s, attending the same events, the same parties, without their daughter. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking. He thought about Lena's expression when she'd looked at Vanessa. Not afraid. Not even particularly angry, just knowing. Like she'd seen something everyone else had missed. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant, confirming Wednesday's meeting with the Barrett Group, 2 p.m. at their offices. Ethan typed back, confirmed. "And do me a favor, see what you can find out about Vanessa Laurent's background, pre-2006. The response came quickly. "Specific angle?" "Just curious," Ethan wrote. "But be discreet." He set down the phone and picked up his whiskey, finally taking a sip. In his experience, people like Vanessa Laurent didn't appear from nowhere at age 18. They came from somewhere, had histories that shaped them, secrets they'd buried so deep they forgot they were there, until someone like Lena Brooks came along and started digging. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city stretched out below his Pacific Heights home, lights glittering like scattered diamonds. Ethan wondered what other secrets were hiding in that darkness, waiting for someone brave enough or desperate enough to uncover them. And he wondered what Lena Brooks had seen in those archives that made her willing to risk everything to humiliate one of San Francisco's most powerful women. Because that's what tonight had been. Not defense, not survival. Revenge. Carefully planned, perfectly executed revenge. The kind that required knowing your target's weaknesses, anticipating their moves, staying 3 steps ahead while looking like you were barely keeping up. Ethan raised his glass toward the window, toward the invisible restaurant somewhere in those distant lights where a waitress was probably cleaning up after the dinner rush, counting her tips, planning her next move. "Well played, Lena Brooks," he murmured. "Well played indeed." The call came 3 days later, just as Lena was elbow deep in someone else's dirty dishes. "Lena, phone." Marcus the line cook held out the restaurant's ancient cordless like it might bite him. "Some guy. Sounds expensive." She wiped her hands on her apron, already running through possibilities. Bill collectors had a particular tone, apologetic but firm, like doctors delivering bad news. This wasn't that. Her landlord, maybe, except he usually just taped notes to her door written in angry Sharpie. "Hello? Miss Brooks?" The voice was smooth, professional, male. "My name is David Chen. I'm calling on behalf of Ethan Caldwell." Lena's hand tightened on the phone. Behind her, the industrial dishwasher rumbled through another cycle, steam rising in thick clouds that made the back kitchen feel like a sauna. "I'm sorry, who?" "Ethan Caldwell. He was dining at the Velvet Harbor this past Saturday evening. He asked me to reach out to you regarding a potential opportunity." Saturday. The night Vanessa Laurent had tried to destroy her in front of half of San Francisco's elite and ended up destroying herself instead. The night a stranger in a charcoal tie had stood up and defended a waitress he'd never met. "What kind of opportunity?" Lena asked carefully. "Mr. Caldwell would prefer to discuss the details in person. Would you be available for lunch tomorrow, say 1 o'clock at Café Marais?" Café Marais, the kind of place where lunch costs more than Lena made in a week, where people discussed art acquisitions and vacation homes while she served them overpriced salads. "I work lunch shifts. Mr. Caldwell is aware. He's already spoken with your manager. You'll be compensated for the time, of course." Of course. Because billionaires could just rearrange other people's schedules with a phone call and a checkbook. Lena should have said no. Should have asked more questions, demanded details, protected herself the way she'd learned to protect herself over the past 18 months of financial freefall. Instead, she heard herself say, 1 o'clock, I'll be there. She hung up before David Chen could respond, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. Marcus appeared at her elbow with a clean sauté pan. "Everything okay?" "Fine." Lena picked up another plate, scraped congealed béarnaise into the trash. "Just someone who saw me humiliate a billionaire and wants to discuss my future." Huh. Marcus considered this. "That happen a lot in your line of work?" "First time." "Well," he grinned, "maybe lead with that on your resume." Lena got to Café Marais 15 minutes early and spent the time sitting in her car, a 2008 Honda Civic with a cracked windshield and an engine that sounded like it was clearing its throat every time she accelerated, trying to remember how to be someone other than a waitress. It had been 18 months since she'd lost her position at the Historical Society. 18 months of watching her savings evaporate, her apartment shrink, her entire carefully constructed life collapse like a house built on sand. She'd applied for 63 archivist positions in that time, had gotten callbacks from 4, actual interviews from 2, job offers from 0. The problem she'd learned was that historical societies were dying. Funding dried up, collections got donated to universities, positions were consolidated, which meant eliminated, and archivists were a luxury that institutions could no longer afford. So she'd waitressed, because rent didn't care about her degrees or her expertise or the fact that she could trace a document's provenance through 4 centuries, but couldn't remember if Table 7 wanted their dressing on the side. Now Ethan Caldwell, founder of Caldwell Properties, net worth somewhere north of $2 billion, named one of San Francisco's most eligible bachelors by a magazine Lena couldn't afford to buy, wanted to have lunch. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror. The black dress she'd worn to job interviews 2 years ago still fit, though it hung a little looser now. Her hair was pulled back in a bun that she hoped looked professional rather than severe. Minimal makeup because she'd never really learned to do more. She looked like someone trying very hard to look like they had their life together, close enough. Inside, Café Marais was exactly what she expected. White tablecloths, fresh flowers, the kind of quiet that money bought. A hostess who looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine led Lena to a corner table where Ethan Caldwell sat reading something on his phone. He looked up as she approached, and Lena felt that strange jolt of recognition. Not because she knew him. She didn't, not really, but because she'd spent the past 3 days trying not to think about him and failing spectacularly. Miss Brooks. He stood, offered his hand. Thank you for coming. His handshake was firm, brief, professional. Nothing like the way he'd looked at her Saturday night when he'd stepped between her and humiliation, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Mr. Caldwell? Lena sat down, accepted the menu the hostess offered even though she had no intention of eating. Her stomach was doing acrobatics. Your assistant said you wanted to discuss an opportunity. I do. Ethan set aside his phone, gave her his full attention. But first, I owe you an apology. That wasn't what Lena expected. For what? Saturday night. I shouldn't have intervened without asking if you wanted my help. That was presumptuous. You mean when you stopped Vanessa Laurent from having me searched in front of a room full of people? Lena couldn't quite keep the edge out of her voice. Yeah, that was terrible. I really wanted to empty my pockets for security. Something flickered in Ethan's expression. Amusement, maybe. Still, I put you in an awkward position. You put yourself in an awkward position. I was already there. Fair enough. He paused while the waiter appeared, took their orders. Ethan asked for the salmon. Lena requested the cheapest salad on the menu and immediately regretted it when Ethan said she should get whatever she wanted. He was paying. She upgraded to the chicken, felt weird about it. When they were alone again, Ethan leaned forward slightly. I've been thinking about that night, about what happened. You and everyone else in San Francisco. Lena had checked social media exactly once before deleting the apps from her phone. The videos, the memes, the think pieces about wealth and privilege and entitled billionaires. Vanessa Laurent had become a cautionary tale overnight. I'm surprised you want to be seen with me. Might damage your reputation. My reputation can handle it. Ethan's voice was dry. Besides, I'm not here because of what happened. I'm here because of how it happened. Lena went very still. You knew that necklace was in her bag, Ethan continued. You knew because you put it there. It wasn't a question. Lena considered lying, considered standing up and walking out, considered all the ways this conversation could go wrong and the fact that she'd just ordered a $28 chicken dish she couldn't afford to pay for if this turned into an interrogation. I have no idea what you're talking about, she said. Miss Brooks? Lena, if we're going to discuss wild theories about jewelry theft, we should probably be on a first-name basis. Ethan smiled then, and it changed his whole face, made him look younger, less like a magazine cover and more like an actual human being. Ethan. All right, Ethan. Lana folded her hands on the table, channeled every ounce of composure she'd developed serving entitled assholes for 8 months. Let's say, hypothetically, that I did somehow move a $3 million necklace from someone's neck to their purse without anyone noticing. Why would I do something that's spectacularly stupid? Because Vanessa Laurent did something to you first. She's been rude to me exactly twice. That's not exactly grounds for grand larceny. No. Ethan watched her with those sharp gray eyes that probably missed nothing in boardrooms and apparently missed nothing in restaurants either. But it might be grounds for revenge if you knew something about her, something she didn't want anyone to know. The waiter returned with water, with bread, with little dishes of olive oil and balsamic that probably cost more than Lena's phone bill. She waited until he left before responding. You have a very active imagination. I have a very expensive research team. Ethan broke off a piece of bread, didn't eat it. I asked them to look into Vanessa Laurent's background, pre-2006 specifically. Lena's heart rate kicked up, but she kept her expression neutral. Find anything interesting? Nothing. Which is interesting in itself, don't you think? Most people leave some kind of paper trail. Birth certificates, school records, social media from their awkward teenage years. Vanessa Laurent appeared fully formed at 18 years old, already polished, already connected. Maybe her family values privacy. Maybe? Ethan set down the bread. Or maybe Vanessa Laurent isn't who she says she is. The silence stretched between them, full of things neither of them was saying. Finally, Lena picked up her water glass, took a sip. Why are you telling me this? Because I think you already know. I think that's what you do, or what you used to do. Track down information people want buried. Ethan leaned back in his chair. You were an archivist at the Historical Society, specialized in local family histories and genealogical research. Got your master's from Berkeley, published 3 papers on documentation verification and historical record keeping. And then the society lost its funding, and you ended up serving overpriced fish to people who don't appreciate it. Lena's hands tightened on her glass. You really did your research. I told you, expensive team. He paused. I also looked into your financials. You're drowning, Lena. 6 months behind on student loans, 3 months behind on rent. Your car needs work you can't afford. You're eating ramen for dinner and picking up every extra shift you can get. Heat flooded Lena's face. Embarrassment and anger mixing into something toxic. Is there a point to this humiliation, or are you just trying to see how much you can dig up on the poor waitress? The point, Ethan said quietly, is that I want to hire you. That stopped her. What? I need someone who can find information that doesn't want to be found. Someone who understands how to trace histories, verify identities, piece together stories from fragments. He met her eyes. Someone brave enough to go after people like Vanessa Laurent when they deserve it. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I'm asking you to do what you're good at. Research, investigation, documentation. Ethan pulled a business card from his pocket, slid it across the table. My company handles commercial real estate development. Before we invest in a property, I need to know everything about it. Who owned it? What happened there? What's buried in the records that might come back to bite us? Lena picked up the card. Heavy stock, embossed letters. Ethan Caldwell, founder and CEO. You want to hire me as what exactly? A corporate detective? A historical consultant, contractor basis to start, with the possibility of a permanent position if it works out. He named a salary that made Lena's vision blur slightly. Full benefits, flexible hours, your own research budget? It was too much, too good. The kind of offer that had catches hidden in the fine print. Why me? Lena asked. You could hire anyone. Actual private investigators, forensic accountants, people who do this for a living. Because they don't think like you do. Ethan's voice was serious now, intense. I watched you Saturday night. You didn't just react to Vanessa. You planned. You anticipated her moves, stayed calm under pressure, executed perfectly. That kind of strategic thinking is rare. Or maybe I just got lucky. You didn't. Ethan smiled slightly, and we both know it. Their food arrived. Lena stared at her chicken, trying to process what was happening. Job offers didn't fall from the sky. Billionaires didn't rescue waitresses and then hire them based on one night of drama. This had to be a trick. A test. Some elaborate setup she didn't understand yet. I need to think about it, she said. Of course. Ethan cut into his salmon. Take whatever time you need, the offer stands. They ate in silence for a while. The chicken was good. Of course it was good, but Lena barely tasted it. Her mind was already spinning through possibilities, consequences, the 1,000 ways this could go wrong. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Sure. Why did you stand up for me Saturday night? You didn't know me. Didn't owe me anything. Why get involved? Ethan was quiet for a moment. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. Then he set it down, looked at her directly. I have a daughter, Sophie. She's 7. His voice softened in a way that made Lena's chest ache. Her mother died when she was 2, brain aneurysm. No warning, no chance to say goodbye. Just there one day and gone the next. I'm sorry, Lena said quietly. Thank you. Ethan cleared his throat. The point is, I'm raising her alone. And every day I think about the kind of person I want her to become. The kind of world I want her to grow up in. He met Lena's eyes. I want her to live in a world where people stand up for each other, where power doesn't automatically win, where someone like Vanessa Laurent can't destroy someone like you just because she feels like it. So I'm a teaching moment for your daughter? No. Ethan's smile was rueful. You're someone who got dealt a bad hand and still managed to beat the house. I respect that. Lena felt something shift in her chest. Not trust, she'd learned better than that, but maybe the beginning of it, the possibility. I'll think about your offer, she said again. That's all I ask. They finished lunch talking about nothing important. San Francisco's weather, Sophie's latest school project, the restaurant industry's brutal hours. Easy conversation, surprisingly comfortable. When they were done, Ethan insisted on walking her to her car. He didn't comment on the Civic's condition, didn't react when she had to jiggle the key in the lock to get the door open. "One more thing," he said as she slid into the driver's seat. "Whatever you found on Vanessa Laurent, whatever made you willing to risk everything to humiliate her, I hope it was worth it." Lena looked up at him, this stranger who'd somehow seen through her in the space of one dinner service. "It was," she said, and she meant it. Gave us some jets. The research had started as an accident. 3 months ago, Lena had been shelving books at the downtown library, a volunteer position she'd taken because it kept her skills sharp and her references current, when she'd noticed a damaged photo album in the donation bin. The album was falling apart, water-damaged and moldy, probably headed for the trash. But something about it caught Lena's eye. The binding, the paper quality, the specific shade of fading that suggested 1990s drugstore processing. She'd pulled it out, carefully opened the cover. Inside were photos of a family. Mother, father, 2 daughters. Small-town America, county fairs and high school graduations and 4th of July barbecues. The kind of photos everyone's family had, tucked in drawers and forgotten. Except one of the daughters looked familiar. Very familiar. Lena had stared at that photo for 10 minutes, her archivist's brain automatically cataloging details. The girl was maybe 16, all awkward angles and cheap makeup. She wore a sash that read Miss Junior Nevada 1999 and smiled like she was trying too hard. The eyes were wrong, the nose was different, the hair was lighter, but the bone structure was the same, the way she held her shoulders, the particular tilt of her chin. Lena had pulled out her phone, searched for images of Vanessa Laurent. Found dozens. Vanessa at charity galas, at fashion shows, at her father's real estate empire headquarters. Vanessa Laurent, born to privilege, educated at the finest schools, heir to a fortune. And absolutely, unmistakably, the same person as the girl in the county fair photo. Lena had stolen the album. Not borrowed, stolen. Slipped it into her bag and walked out of the library with her heart hammering and her palms sweating. Then she'd started digging. The photo had a name written on the back in faded ballpoint. Cassidy Vale, Jr., Miss Nevada, Carson City. Cassidy Vale, not Vanessa Laurent. It had taken Lena 2 weeks of searching obituaries, census records, and high school yearbooks before she found the rest. Cassidy Vale, born in Sparks, Nevada, to Linda and Robert Vale. Father worked at a tire factory. Mother cleaned houses. 2 daughters, Cassidy and Jennifer. Jennifer had died in a car accident in 2004, age 19. Robert had died of a heart attack in 2006. Linda had remarried in 2007 and moved to Arizona. And Cassidy had disappeared. No death certificate, no marriage license, no employment records or tax filings or social media presence. She'd just vanished. Until she reappeared in San Francisco as Vanessa Laurent, daughter of real estate mogul Richard Laurent and his wife Catherine. Complete with a backstory about boarding schools in Switzerland and a childhood spent summering in the Hamptons. The Laurents had no biological children. Lena had verified that through medical records that probably violated a dozen privacy laws to access. Catherine Laurent had suffered 3 miscarriages before finally giving up on having children. But in 2006, suddenly they had a daughter. A fully grown, perfectly polished daughter who spoke fluent French and knew which fork to use and never ever mentioned growing up in Nevada. Lena had spent weeks trying to figure out the connection. How a tire factory worker's daughter from Sparks had become a billionaire's heiress in San Francisco. She'd never found the answer, but she'd found enough to know that Vanessa Laurent was built on lies. That every smile, every carefully curated Instagram post, every charitable donation was part of a performance designed to hide Cassidy Vale. And when Vanessa had tried to humiliate her in front of the Velvet Harbor's dining room, Lena had decided it was time for Cassidy to come home. The necklace thing had been improvisation, risky, stupid improvisation born from rage and desperation and the particular cocktail of emotions that came from having nothing left to lose. She'd palmed it during the wine refill. The clasp had been loose, practically falling off Vanessa's neck already, and dropped it into the clutch during the same motion. The whole thing had taken maybe 3 seconds. 3 seconds that could have gotten her arrested, sued, destroyed. Instead, it had gotten her a job offer from a billionaire who apparently appreciated elaborate revenge schemes. Lena sat in her car outside Cafe Marais for 20 minutes after Ethan left, staring at his business card. She should throw it away. Should go back to the Velvet Harbor, finish her shift, keep her head down and her mouth shut. Should stop picking fights with people who could crush her without breaking a sweat. Instead, she pulled out her phone and dialed the number on the card. David Chen answered on the second ring. Mr. Caldwell's office. This is Lena Brooks. She took a breath. Tell Mr. Caldwell I accept his offer. The offices of Caldwell Properties occupied the top 3 floors of a building in the financial district, with views that probably cost more than Lena's annual salary. She showed up on Monday morning wearing the same black dress from lunch, carrying a bag that held 2 notebooks, 3 pens, and a level of anxiety that was probably visible from space. David Chen met her in the lobby. Late 30s, expensive suit, the kind of efficient competence that suggested he ran Ethan's life with military precision. Miss Brooks, welcome. He handed her a visitor badge. We'll get you set up with permanent credentials this week, but this will work for now. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor was smooth and silent. Lena spent it staring at her reflection in the polished doors, trying to convince herself she belonged here. She didn't. The offices were all glass and steel, modern in a way that felt vaguely threatening. People in expensive suits moved through open-plan workspaces, their conversations a low hum of business jargon and casual confidence. Mr. Caldwell is finishing a call, David said, leading her through a maze of desks and conference rooms. I'll show you to your office. Office, singular. Not a cubicle, not a desk in the corner, but an actual office with walls and a door and a window that overlooked the city. Lena stood in the doorway, not quite believing it. It's small, David apologized, but it's private, which Mr. Caldwell thought you'd appreciate. There's a computer, already set up with your login credentials, and access to our research databases. He handed her a folder. Employee handbook, benefits information, building access card. HR will want to meet with you this afternoon to finish onboarding. This is, Lena's voice caught. This is real, very real. David smiled. Mr. Caldwell doesn't make offers he doesn't intend to follow through on. Your first assignment is already waiting. He nodded toward the desk, where a thin file folder sat next to the computer. Property assessment for a commercial development in the Mission. Standard background check. Previous owners, any historical issues, contamination concerns, nothing too complicated to start. He left before Lena could respond, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Lena stood there for a full minute, just breathing. Then she sat down at the desk, her desk, and opened the file. She'd been working for maybe an hour when someone knocked on the doorframe. So you're the waitress? Lena looked up. The woman in her doorway was maybe 40, with dark hair pulled into a severe bun and the kind of posture that suggested either dance training or military service. She wore a navy pantsuit that probably cost what Lena used to make in a month and an expression that could freeze vodka. I'm the historical consultant, Lena said carefully. Right. The historical consultant who used to serve appetizers at the Velvet Harbor. The woman stepped into the office uninvited. I'm Patricia Moore, Chief Operating Officer. I handle the actual running of this company while Ethan plays savior to people he meets in restaurants. There was so much venom in that sentence that Lena actually flinched. Nice to meet you, she managed. Let's skip the pleasantries. Patricia perched on the edge of Lena's desk like she owned it. I don't know what you did to convince Ethan to hire you, and frankly, I don't care. What I do care about is making sure you understand the situation. Which is? This company has spent 15 years building a reputation for excellence. We don't cut corners, we don't take unnecessary risks, and we absolutely do not hire unqualified candidates because the boss felt like playing white knight. Patricia's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. So whatever you're expecting, special treatment, easy assignments, a free ride on Ethan's guilt complex, forget it. You'll do the work or you'll be gone. Clear? Lena felt something cold settle in her stomach. Crystal. Good. Patricia stood. Also, stay away from his daughter. Ethan has terrible boundaries when it comes to Sophie, and I don't need him dragging random employees into his personal life. I have no intention. I don't care about your intentions. I care about protecting this company. Patricia headed for the door, paused. Oh, and that file David gave you, it's due by Friday. Most people take 2 weeks for that kind of research. Let's see what you're actually capable of. She left without waiting for a response. Lena sat very still, her hands shaking slightly. Then she opened the file again and started reading with the kind of focus she used to bring to damaged manuscripts and disputed provenance claims. Patricia Moore wanted to see what she was capable of. Fine, she'd show her. The property assessment took Lena 3 days instead of 2 weeks. She traced ownership back to 1906, documented every sale and transfer, uncovered 3 separate instances of code violations, 2 failed inspections, and one very interesting detail about the building's original construction that explained why the foundation kept settling. She compiled it into a 20-page report with citations, cross-references, and recommendations for additional structural testing before any development began. Then she put it on David Chen's desk Thursday afternoon and went home to her apartment, still behind on rent, still falling apart, but somehow feeling less claustrophobic than it had a week ago. Friday morning, Ethan called her into his office. It was the first time she'd seen him since lunch at Café Mireille. He sat behind a desk that looked like it cost more than a car, reading her report with the kind of attention she remembered from professors evaluating thesis papers. "This is good work," he said without preamble. "Really good. You found things our usual research team missed." "Thank you. Patricia thinks I should fire you anyway." Ethan looked up, and there was something complicated in his expression. "She gave me a very long speech about nepotism and liability and maintaining professional standards." Lena's stomach dropped. "Oh, I told her if she had a problem with my hiring decisions, she was welcome to find another company to run." Ethan set down the report. "She's been with me since the beginning, helped build this place from nothing, but she doesn't get to dictate who I hire or why. I don't want to cause problems. You're not. Patricia is." He rubbed his eyes, suddenly looking tired. "She means well. She's protective of the company, of me. But she doesn't get to decide your worth based on where you used to work." Lena didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Ethan pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. "New assignment. We're looking at acquiring a hotel in Nob Hill, built in 1924, changed hands about a dozen times, currently owned by a trust that's been trying to sell for 3 years. I need you to find out why no one's buying." "Okay." Lena took the folder. "Anything specific I should look for?" "Whatever you think matters." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "I trust your judgment, Lena. That's why you're here." Those words shouldn't have meant as much as they did. Lena was halfway to the door when Ethan spoke again. "Hey, Friday night. Sophie has a school thing, science fair presentation. Would you want to come?" She turned. "What?" "I know it's weird. We barely know each other, but she's been asking about you ever since I mentioned the new person working here, and—" He stopped, looking almost embarrassed. "Forget it. That was inappropriate. You don't have to—" "What time?" Lena heard herself ask. Ethan blinked. 6:30. At her school, Laurel Heights Elementary. "I'll be there." She left before he could respond, her heart doing that complicated thing again. This was dangerous. Getting involved with Ethan's personal life, meeting his daughter, letting herself believe that maybe, possibly, things could be different this time. But she'd spent 18 months playing it safe, keeping her head down, surviving. Maybe it was time to try living instead. Sophie Caldwell had her father's eyes and her mother's smile. At least that's what Ethan had told Lena on the drive over, his voice going soft in a way that made her chest ache. The girl was 7 years old, all skinny limbs and wild dark curls pulled into pigtails that were already coming loose. She also had opinions about volcanoes that she delivered with the confidence of someone who'd spent 3 weeks building a papier-mâché mountain and wasn't about to let anyone forget it. "See, the magma comes up through here," Sophie pointed at the carefully painted interior of her volcano, which sat on a table between a kid's solar system mobile and another kid's attempt at explaining photosynthesis. "And then when the pressure gets too high, it explodes, like when you shake a soda can." "That's really good," Lena said, and meant it. The volcano was actually impressive, detailed, structurally sound, with hand-labeled diagrams explaining plate tectonics. "Did you help her with this?" she asked Ethan quietly. "I helped buy the supplies." He grinned. "Everything else was Sophie. She's been watching volcano documentaries for a month. They're cool. Sophie interjected, apparently possessing her father's hearing too. Did you know there's a supervolcano in Yellowstone that could basically destroy America if it erupted? I did not know that, Lena said. Well, now you do. Sophie adjusted one of her pigtails. Are you my dad's girlfriend? Lena choked on air. Ethan's face went red. Sophie, what? Maria said you were bringing a girlfriend to my science fair. She said her mom saw it on Instagram or something. Sophie looked between them, completely unbothered by the adult discomfort she'd just created. It's okay if you are. I don't mind. I work for your dad, Lena managed, at his company. Oh. Sophie considered this. That's less interesting, but I guess that's okay too. A teacher called for everyone's attention, saving Lena from having to respond. The presentation started, kids reading from note cards, explaining their projects with varying degrees of coherence. Sophie's was third, and she delivered it like she was addressing a board meeting, complete with hand gestures and vocal emphasis. Ethan watched his daughter with an expression that made Lena want to look away. It was too private, too raw. The kind of love that didn't leave room for anything else. When Sophie finished, to enthusiastic applause from parents who probably clapped for everyone, she bounded back over to them, her whole face lit up. That was perfect, Ethan said, pulling her into a hug. I'm so proud of you. Did you see how I explained the Ring of Fire? Mrs. Peterson said that was college-level information. Sophie pulled back, looked at Lena. Did you like it? It was amazing, Lena said honestly. You're going to be a scientist someday. Or a teacher, or maybe an astronaut. Sophie shrugged. I have time to decide. They stayed for another hour, looking at other projects, eating terrible cookies from the snack table, making small talk with other parents who clearly knew Ethan and were obviously curious about Lena. She caught the looks, the whispered conversations, the careful assessment. Ethan Caldwell had brought a woman to his daughter's school event. A woman who wasn't a nanny or an assistant or one of the society wives who probably threw themselves at him regularly. That meant something. Lena just wasn't sure what. On the drive back, Ethan had insisted on picking her up, said it didn't make sense to take two cars. Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, her head pressed against the window. She likes you, Ethan said quietly. She doesn't know me. She knows enough. He glanced in the rearview mirror, checking on his daughter with the automatic reflex of single parenthood. Sophie's a good judge of character, better than I am, honestly. I doubt that. You'd be surprised. Ethan turned onto Lena's street. She'd given him her address with significant embarrassment, knowing what her neighborhood looked like compared to his Pacific Heights mansion. Her mother used to say Sophie could spot bullshit from a mile away, even as a toddler. It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife directly. Lena didn't know how to respond, so she went with honesty. She sounds like she was a good mom. The best. Ethan's voice was rough. I still don't know how to fill that space. Some days I feel like I'm just improvising, hoping I don't screw her up too badly. You're doing fine. She's happy, confident. Those are the things that matter. He pulled up outside her apartment building, a 4-story walk-up that had seen better decades. The front steps were cracked, the paint peeling. Her neighbor's trash bags sat on the curb, probably had been there for 3 days. Lena waited for Ethan to react, to say something about the neighborhood or the building or the very obvious gap between his world and hers. He didn't. Thank you for coming tonight, he said instead. It meant a lot to Sophie, to me. Thanks for inviting me. Lena unbuckled her seatbelt, hesitated. Can I ask you something? Why did you really hire me? And don't say it was because of the research skills or the strategic thinking. There are 100 people with better credentials who would have taken that job. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his hands resting on the steering wheel. Because you reminded me that there are still people who fight back, he said finally. Most of the world I live in, people just accept things. Accept that the wealthy win, that power protects itself, that nothing really changes. But you didn't accept it. You saw an injustice and you did something about it. Consequences be damned. That's a nice way of saying I committed a felony. You evened the scales. Ethan turned to look at her. Vanessa Laurent tried to destroy you because she could. Because in her world, people like you don't matter. And you made her pay for it. That takes courage. Lena's throat felt tight. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing. She should get out of the car. Should say goodnight, go upstairs to her apartment, maintain whatever professional distance was left between them. Instead, she heard herself say, "Do you want to know what I found? About Vanessa?" Ethan's expression sharpened. "Only if you want to tell me." So she did. Told him about the photo album, about Cassidy Vale and the Junior Miss Nevada pageant, about the dead father and the disappeared girl and the billionaire heiress who appeared from nowhere. Ethan listened without interrupting, his face unreadable in the dashboard lights. "You're sure?" he asked when she finished. "I'm sure. I have documentation, records, photos, everything except the connection between Cassidy Vale and Richard Laurent. That part I haven't figured out yet. But you're working on it." It wasn't a question. Lena smiled slightly. "I'm working on it. That's dangerous, you know. If Vanessa finds out you have that information, she already knows I have something. That's why she tried to destroy me at the restaurant." Lena shrugged. "I'm past worrying about what she might do." "You should worry." Ethan's voice was serious. "The Laurents don't play games. If they think you're a threat, then they're right to be worried." Lena opened the car door, cool night air rushing in. "Thanks for the ride, Ethan. Tell Sophie I said goodnight." She was halfway up the steps when he called after her. "Lena." She turned. "Be careful," he said. "Please." Something in his voice made her chest tight again. She nodded, went inside before she could do something stupid like go back to the car. Upstairs, her apartment was exactly as she'd left it. Small, cramped, walls too thin to block out the neighbor's television. She made instant ramen for dinner, sat on her second-hand couch, and pulled out her laptop. The Nob Hill Hotel research could wait. She had other work to do. The connection between Cassidy Vale and Richard Laurent took Lena another week to find. And when she did, she almost missed it. It was buried in a Nevada business registry from 2005. Laurent Properties, LLC, had owned a small apartment complex in Sparks for exactly 8 months before selling it at a significant loss. The complex manager during that time had been Linda Vale, Cassidy's mother. Lena sat back in her office chair staring at the screen. There it was, the thread connecting a tire factory worker's daughter to a billionaire real estate developer. But it didn't explain how. Didn't explain why Richard Laurent would take in his former property manager's daughter and raise her as his own. Didn't explain the fabricated history, the careful construction of Vanessa Laurent's identity. Unless Lena pulled up Richard Laurent's business records, started tracing his acquisitions and sales around 2005 and 2006, found something interesting. A property in Reno that had been the subject of a lawsuit. Tenant dispute, something about unsafe living conditions, and a child who'd been injured. The case had been settled quietly, sealed records, no public information available. But the timing matched, and the property management company listed on the lawsuit was the same one that had managed the Sparks apartment complex. Lena reached for her phone, then stopped. This was the kind of information that could end careers, destroy families, the kind of thing that once released couldn't be taken back. She thought about Vanessa Laurent's face when the necklace had fallen from her clutch, that moment of raw panic before the mask slammed back into place. Thought about Cassidy Vale, growing up in Sparks, winning beauty pageants, dreaming of something bigger. Thought about what desperation made people willing to do. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Lena answered without thinking. "Hello? Miss Brooks?" The voice was female, cold. "You don't know me, but I know quite a bit about you." Lena's hand tightened on the phone. "Who is this?" "A friend of Vanessa Laurent's. I'm calling to give you some advice." A pause. "Stop digging." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. The research into Miss Laurent's background, the questions you've been asking, the records you've been accessing. It needs to stop." Lena's heart hammered. "Or what?" "Or you'll find that your new position at Caldwell Properties becomes untenable. Your landlord will discover several lease violations. Your student loans will go into default. Your car will fail inspection." The voice remained pleasant, conversational. "These things happen to people who make poor choices." "Is that a threat?" "It's a prediction." The woman paused. "You seem like a smart person, Miss Brooks. Smart enough to know when you're outmatched. Walk away. Forget whatever you think you've found. Move on with your life. The line went dead. Lena sat there, phone pressed to her ear, her whole body shaking. They knew. Vanessa knew she was still digging, knew enough to send someone to threaten her, which meant she was close to something that mattered. She pulled up her email, started a new message to Ethan, typed out everything. The phone call, the threat, the connection she'd found. Deleted it. This wasn't his fight. He'd already done enough, given her a job, trusted her with his daughter. She couldn't drag him into this. Instead, she saved her research to a flash drive, uploaded copies to 3 separate cloud accounts, and emailed encrypted files to her old thesis advisor at Berkeley with instructions to open them if anything happened to her. Paranoid? Maybe. But people didn't make threatening phone calls unless they were scared, and scared people did desperate things. The Velvet Harbor called 2 days later. Lena, hey! It was Marcus, the line cook. You got a delivery here, some fancy envelope. Manager said I should let you know. I don't work there anymore, Marcus. Yeah, I know. That's why it's weird. It's addressed to you care of the restaurant. Want me to open it? Lena's stomach clenched. No, don't touch it. I'll be there in 20 minutes. She told David Chen she had a doctor's appointment, left the office, drove to the restaurant with her hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. The envelope sat on the hostess stand, thick cream paper with her name written in elegant script. No return address. You okay? Marcus asked, watching her stare at it. You look like you're gonna throw up. I'm fine. Lena picked up the envelope, felt its weight, something inside, small and hard. Thanks for calling. She opened it in her car. Inside was a single photograph. The photo album. Her photo album, the one she'd stolen from the library. The one with Cassidy Vale's pictures. Someone had taken a photograph of it sitting on her kitchen counter, the album open to that Junior Miss Nevada page. The message was clear. We know where you live. We know what you have. We can get to you anytime. Lena's hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped the photo. She drove to Ethan's office on instinct, some animal part of her brain seeking safety. David Chen took one look at her face and immediately buzzed Ethan. Send her in, Ethan's voice came through the intercom. Lena walked into his office and handed him the photograph without saying anything. Ethan studied it, his expression going progressively darker. When did you get this? 10 minutes ago. It was delivered to the Velvet Harbor. Lena's voice was steadier than she felt. Someone was in my apartment. Someone went through my things and took this picture. Did you call the police? And tell them what? That I stole a photo album and now someone's returning the favor? She laughed, the sound coming out wrong. I can't go to the police, Ethan. Everything I have on Vanessa, I obtained through legally questionable means. Then you need to stop, now, before this gets worse. It's already worse. Lena sank into the chair across from his desk. They called me 2 days ago, threatened to destroy my life if I didn't back off. Ethan's jaw tightened. And you didn't think to tell me? It's not your problem. Like hell it isn't. He stood, started pacing. You work for me, Lena. That makes it my problem. And even if you didn't, he stopped, ran a hand through his hair. You can't stay in that apartment. It's not safe. I can't afford anywhere else. Then stay at my house. Lena blinked. What? I have 6 bedrooms. Sophie would love it. You'd be safe. Ethan was already pulling out his phone. I'll have Marcus pick up your things, get you moved. Ethan, stop. Lena stood. I appreciate it. I do, but I can't just move into your house. That's insane. What's insane is you staying somewhere that's been compromised by someone who took a photograph. That's not exactly breaking and entering. It's a threat. Ethan's voice was hard. And the Laurents don't make threats they won't follow through on. You sound like you know them. I know of them. Everyone in real estate does. He set down his phone. Richard Laurent has a reputation. Smart, ruthless, doesn't leave loose ends. If he thinks you're a problem, then he's right. Lena met Ethan's eyes. I am a problem, because I'm not backing down. Even if it costs you everything? I don't have much left to lose. The silence between them was heavy with things neither wanted to say. Finally, Ethan sighed. At least let me increase your security. Car service instead of driving yourself. Building security for your apartment. Something. That's excessive. It's necessary. He pulled up a contact on his phone. I'm calling my security team. They'll do a sweep of your apartment, set up cameras, make sure... Ethan, Lena put her hand over his, stopping him. I can't let you do this. Any of this. It's too much. Why? Because you're proud? Because you don't like accepting help? His hand turned under hers, fingers curling around her wrist. Or because you're scared of what it means? Her pulse hammered under his touch. What does it mean? I don't know. Ethan's voice was rough. But I know I can't watch you put yourself in danger and do nothing. I can't... He stopped, seemed to be fighting with something. I care about you, Lena. More than I probably should, considering we've known each other for 3 weeks. But there it is. Lena's heart was doing something complicated in her chest, something that felt dangerous and necessary at the same time. I care about you too, she said quietly. But that's exactly why I can't drag you into this. You have Sophie to think about, a company to run. You can't risk all of that for what? For you? Ethan's thumb brushed the inside of her wrist. You're not a risk, Lena. His office door flew open. Patricia Moore stood in the doorway, her face tight with anger. We have a problem, she said. Ethan dropped Lena's hand, stepped back. Patricia, I'm in a meeting. I know, with her. Patricia's gaze could have cut glass. That's the problem. She threw a magazine on Ethan's desk. Society pages. The kind that tracked wealthy people's movements like safari guides, tracking lions. The headline read, Caldwell's New Flame, Billionaire CEO, spotted with mystery woman at daughter's school event. Below it was a photo of Ethan and Lena outside the science fair, his hand on her back, both of them smiling. Congratulations, Patricia said, her voice dripping acid. You've made the gossip columns, both of you. Lena felt sick. Patricia, Ethan started, do you have any idea what this does to the company, to your reputation? Patricia was practically vibrating with fury. Dating an employee is bad enough. Dating an employee who's embroiled in a public feud with Vanessa Laurent is a PR nightmare. I'm not dating her. The words hit Lena like a slap, even though they were technically true. Try telling that to the photographers, Patricia shot back, or to Vanessa Laurent's lawyers who called me an hour ago making very pointed inquiries about your relationship with Miss Brooks and whether Caldwell Properties has been using corporate resources to harass their client. That's ridiculous. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you hired someone specifically to dig up dirt on a rival family. That's corporate espionage at worst, massive professional liability at best. Lena's research has nothing to do with, doesn't matter what it has to do with. What matters is how it looks. Patricia turned to Lena. I told you to stay away from his personal life. Clearly, you didn't listen. That's enough. Ethan's voice went cold. You don't talk to her like that. Then you tell me how I should handle this. Because right now, we have potential legal action from one of the most powerful families in the city, gossip columns speculating about your love life, and a board that's going to ask some very hard questions at next month's meeting. Ethan's jaw worked. We'll issue a statement. Make it clear that Lena is a valued employee, that there's no romantic relationship, that any research she's conducting is standard due diligence. And when they ask about the science fair, that was personal, not company business. Everything is company business when you're the CEO, Ethan. You know that. Patricia's voice softened slightly. I'm trying to protect you, both of you, but you're making it very difficult. Lena found her voice. I'll resign. No. Ethan turned to her. Absolutely not. It makes sense. Removes the conflict of interest, eliminates the corporate liability, and proves Patricia's point that people like you can be pushed out anytime someone with power decides you're inconvenient. Ethan's eyes were fierce. No, you're not resigning. We'll figure this out another way. There is no other way. Patricia picked up the magazine. Either she goes, or this becomes the story that defines your company. Your choice. She left without waiting for a response. The silence that followed felt like standing in a vacuum. I should go, Lena said finally. Lena, she's right, Ethan. I'm causing problems you don't need. And for what? A chance to expose someone who's probably untouchable anyway? She stood, avoiding his eyes. I'll clean out my office, give you the hotel research before I leave. I said no, and I'm saying I can't stay. Lena finally looked at him. I can't be the reason your company suffers. I can't be the reason Sophie has to deal with photographers and gossip. I can't. Her voice caught. I care about you too much to let that happen. Ethan crossed the space between them in 2 steps, took her face in his hands. Then stay, he said. Fight. Let me help you fight. You'll lose everything. Not everything. His thumb brushed her cheek. Not the things that matter. Lena wanted to believe him. Wanted to lean into his touch and pretend that love and good intentions were enough to beat money and power and people who made problems disappear. But she'd learned better. She stepped back, broke the contact. I'll have my things out by tomorrow, she said. And she left before he could stop her. The office was almost empty when Lena started packing. Most people had gone home, leaving just the cleaning crew and the occasional workaholic burning the midnight oil. She didn't have much. The notebooks, some pens, a coffee mug she'd brought from home. The hotel research sat on her desk, finished 3 days early, probably her best work. None of it mattered now. She was sealing the last box when she heard the voice. How unfortunate. Lena spun. Vanessa Laurent stood in her doorway, wearing a black coat that probably cost more than Lena's car, and an expression that could freeze mercury. Building security is surprisingly easy to bypass when you know the right people, Vanessa said conversationally. Did you know that? Lena's hand moved toward her phone. I wouldn't. Vanessa held up her own phone, showed Lena the screen. I have 3 photographers positioned outside this building. 1 phone call, and they'll get some very interesting pictures of us having what looks like a confrontation. The narrative writes itself. Jilted employee attacks innocent victim. What do you want? To talk. Vanessa stepped into the office, closed the door behind her. You've been very busy, Miss Brooks. Digging into things that don't concern you. Making wild accusations. I haven't made any accusations. Yet. But you plan to. Vanessa's smile was cold. That's why you stole that photo album. Why you've been researching my family. You think you've found something damaging. I don't think, I know. Do you? Vanessa tilted her head. Then let me save you some time. Yes, I grew up in Nevada. Yes, my birth name was Cassidy Vale. Yes, Richard and Catherine Laurent adopted me when I was 17 years old. She said it casually, like discussing the weather. None of that is the secret you think it is. Lena's pulse kicked up. Your entire public identity is a lie. My public identity is a carefully constructed truth. There's a difference. Vanessa perched on the edge of Lena's desk. The Laurents wanted a daughter. I wanted a better life. We made a mutually beneficial arrangement. After what? After your mother worked for Richard Laurent? After something happened that he needed to cover up? Vanessa's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. You don't know anything, she said quietly. I know about the lawsuit, the property in Reno, the injured child, the sealed settlement. I know your mother managed that property. I know the timing matches exactly when you entered the Laurent family. Lena leaned forward. What happened, Vanessa? What did Richard Laurent do that was bad enough he needed to buy your silence with a new identity? Careful, Miss Brooks. Vanessa's voice had gone dangerous. You're making accusations you can't prove. Can I? Lena opened her laptop, pulled up the files she'd compiled. I have documentation, dates, records, witness statements from former tenants. I have enough to ask very uncomfortable questions. And where will you take those questions? To the press? They'll laugh you out of the room, a bitter ex-waitress with an axe to grind. To the police? Good luck getting them interested in a 20-year-old lawsuit with sealed records. Vanessa stood. You have nothing, Lena. Nothing that matters. Then why are you here? The question hung in the air. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment, her mask slipping just enough to show the woman underneath. The girl from Sparks, who'd reinvented herself, buried Cassidy Vale so deep she'd almost forgotten she existed. Because you're right, she said finally. About some of it. And because I'm asking you, person to person, not billionaire to waitress, to let it go. Why should I? Because some secrets exist for good reasons. Vanessa's voice was softer now, almost human. Because exposing them doesn't help anyone and hurts people who don't deserve it. Because she stopped, seemed to be struggling with something. Because I was 17 years old and terrified, and the Lawrence gave me a chance I wouldn't have had otherwise. That's all. That's not all. Lena stood. There's more. Something you're not telling me. There's always more. Vanessa smiled, sad and bitter. But you don't get to know it. Nobody does. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle. For what it's worth, she said without turning around, I'm sorry. For the restaurant, for the threats, for all of it. You didn't deserve that. But you did it anyway. I did. Vanessa looked back, and for just a second, Lena saw Cassidy Vale looking out from behind the carefully constructed facade. Because that's what survival looks like sometimes. You do what you have to do, and you live with the consequences. Then she was gone, leaving Lena alone with her boxes and her research, and the uncomfortable feeling that she'd just missed something important. Lena didn't go home that night. Couldn't face the apartment that someone had violated, the walls that suddenly felt paper thin. Instead, she drove to a 24-hour diner in the Tenderloin and sat in a booth with coffee she didn't drink, staring at her laptop screen. Vanessa's words kept replaying in her head. Some secrets exist for good reasons. Because I was 17 years old and terrified. What had happened to a 17-year-old girl that was bad enough to warrant a complete identity change? What kind of terror made you bury yourself so deep you became someone else entirely? Lena pulled up the old lawsuit records again. The ones with the sealed settlement. The plaintiff had been a family named Torres. Maria Torres, age 9, had suffered severe lead poisoning from the apartment's deteriorating paint. Brain damage, permanent developmental delays, medical bills that would follow the family forever. The property manager listed was Linda Vale. The property owner was Laurent Properties, LLC. The settlement had been reached 3 months before Cassidy Vale became Vanessa Laurent. Lena sat back, the pieces clicking together in a way that made her stomach turn. Richard Laurent hadn't adopted Cassidy out of kindness. He'd bought her silence. A teenage girl who'd seen something, knew something, could testify to something that would destroy him. And he'd paid for that silence with a new life, a new identity, everything a girl from Sparks could ever dream of. The question was, what had Cassidy seen? Lena's phone buzzed. Ethan, where are you? She stared at the text, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She should tell him to leave her alone, that she was handling it, that mixing business and personal had already caused enough damage. Instead, she typed, Danny's Diner, Mission Street. The reply came back immediately. Stay there, I'm coming. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to say she didn't need rescuing, but the truth was she was tired of being alone, tired of fighting everything by herself. So she waited. Ethan arrived 20 minutes later, still wearing his work clothes, his tie loosened and his hair messed up like he'd been running his hands through it. He slid into the booth across from her without asking, signaled the waitress for coffee. You didn't go home, he said. Brilliant deduction. Lena, Vanessa came to see me, at the office. Lena turned her laptop around, showed him the research. She admitted everything, the adoption, the name change, all of it. Ethan scanned the screen, his expression darkening. This lawsuit. You think this is why Laurent took her in? I think he needed her quiet about something, and the timing's too perfect to be coincidence. Lena pulled the laptop back. But I can't prove it. Can't prove he did anything wrong. Can't prove Cassidy knew anything. It's all circumstantial. Then let it go. I can't. Why not? Ethan's voice was frustrated, raw. What's the end game here, Lena? You expose Vanessa's past, destroy her life, and then what? Does that fix anything? Does that undo what she did to you? It's not about revenge, isn't it? Lena's hands clenched on her coffee cup. It's about justice. That little girl, Maria Torres, she got brain damage because Richard Laurent cut corners on building maintenance, because he valued profit over people. And instead of facing consequences, he paid everyone off and adopted his property manager's daughter to make sure the truth stayed buried. You don't know that's what happened. I know enough. Enough to risk everything? Your job, your safety, my company's reputation? Ethan leaned forward. Because that's what this is costing. Patricia's already drafting your termination papers. The board is talking about investigating whether we used company resources for personal vendettas. And Vanessa's lawyers are circling like sharks. Then fire me. Make it clean. Make it clear I acted alone. Protect yourself. I don't want to protect myself. I want to protect you. Why? The word came out sharper than Lena intended. Why do you care so much? We barely know each other, Ethan. 3 weeks ago, I was just someone who served you dinner. And now you're someone I... He stopped, seemed to struggle with the words. Now you're someone who matters. The diner hummed around them. Someone dropped a plate in the kitchen. A drunk stumbled past their booth, muttering to himself. Normal life happening while Lena's world tilted sideways. I can't matter, she said quietly. Not like this. Not when it costs you everything. Let me decide what it costs. Sophie is 7 years old and doesn't understand any of this. What she does understand is that her father brought someone home who made him smile for the first time in years. Ethan's voice cracked slightly. Do you have any idea how long it's been since I felt something other than tired? Since I looked forward to anything that wasn't a business meeting or a parent-teacher conference? Lena's throat felt tight. That's not fair. None of this is fair. But I'm done pretending I don't care about you because it's complicated or inconvenient or professionally questionable. He reached across the table, took her hand. I care about you, Lena, and I'm asking you to let me help. Not because I think you need saving, but because I can't watch you fight this alone. She should pull her hand away, should maintain boundaries, protect them both from the inevitable disaster this was heading toward. Instead, she held on. I don't know how to stop, she admitted. I see an injustice, and I can't just walk away. It's who I am. I know, it's one of the things Ethan stopped himself. It's why you're good at this work. Why you're good, period. Vanessa asked me to let it go, said some secrets exist for good reasons. Do you believe her? Lena thought about the look in Vanessa's eyes, that flash of Cassidy veil beneath the carefully constructed facade, the fear that still lived there after all these years. I don't know, she said honestly, but I think she believes it. Then maybe that's enough. Maybe you've already won, shown her you could destroy her if you wanted to, made her acknowledge the truth even if it never goes public. Ethan squeezed her hand. You don't have to sacrifice everything to prove a point. It's not about proving a point. It's about... Lena stopped, tried to find words for the feeling that had been driving her since the moment she'd lost her job, lost her savings, lost everything that made her feel like a person who mattered. It's about not being powerless, about showing that people like me can fight back even when the deck is stacked against us. You did fight back. You already showed them. Ethan's thumb brushed across her knuckles. Now show them something else. Show them you're smart enough to know when to stop. Lena wanted to argue, wanted to say that stopping felt like surrender, like admitting the powerful would always win. But she was so tired of fighting. Okay, she whispered. Okay. I'll let it go. Drop the investigation, delete the files, move on. The words tasted like ash. On one condition. What? You helped me find Maria Torres, the girl from the lawsuit. I want to know she's okay, that her family got the help they needed. And if they didn't, Lena met his eyes. Then we helped them. Anonymously, no connection to any of this, just because it's the right thing to do. Ethan was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Then he smiled. Deal. Met. Finding Maria Torres took less time than Lena expected. Ethan's research team, the expensive one he'd mentioned that first day, located her in 3 days. She was 29 now, living in Oakland with her mother. The settlement from Laurent Properties had covered medical expenses and set up a trust fund for ongoing care. Maria worked part-time at a community center, teaching art classes to kids. Her mother had used the money to go back to school, became a social worker specializing in tenant rights. They'd survived. More than survived. They'd built something good from the wreckage. They don't need our help, Lena said, reading the report in Ethan's office. They're doing okay. Better than okay. Ethan pointed to a note at the bottom of the report. Maria's an artist, had a show last month at a gallery in Berkeley. The reviewer called her a singular talent whose work transforms trauma into transcendent beauty. Something in Lena's chest loosened. Not everything Richard Laurent had destroyed stayed destroyed. Some things grew back stronger. Thank you, she said, for doing this. Thank you for letting me. Lena set down the report, looked around the office that had briefly been hers. Patricia had been surprisingly gracious about the resignation, probably relieved to have the problem solved without lawyers getting involved. Lena had 2 weeks left before her contract ended, just enough time to finish the hotel research and train her replacement. After that, she had no idea what came next. "I've been thinking," Ethan said carefully, "about what you said, about not being powerless." "Ethan, hear me out." He pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. "This is a proposal for a new division at Caldwell Properties. Historical research and compliance, focused on investigating properties before acquisition. Making sure we're not buying into situations like the Torres case, making sure past injustices are addressed before we move forward." Lena opened the folder, scanned the first page. Comprehensive property histories, tenant interviews, community impact assessments, everything she'd been doing on the hotel project, formalized into actual corporate policy. "This is good work," she said. "It needs a director, someone who understands research, who gives a damn about people, who won't let me cut corners even when it's profitable." Ethan leaned forward. "I want it to be you." Lena's heart stuttered. "We talked about this. Me working here is a liability, was a liability, past tense." He pulled out another document. "This is a statement from Vanessa Laurent's legal team. No further action planned, no complaints filed, matter considered closed. Patricia negotiated it yesterday." "Hassel, I don't know and I don't care. Point is, you're clear. No legal issues, no conflicts of interest." Ethan's voice was steady. "So I'm asking again, will you stay?" Lena looked at the proposal, at the vision of something that could actually matter. Not revenge, not destruction, but building something better. "Patricia will hate it," she said. "Patricia will deal with it. The board will ask questions." "The board works for me." "Sophie, already asked when you're coming over for dinner again. Apparently you promised to help her with the next science fair project." Ethan smiled. Something about earthquakes. Lena felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and embarrassing. "You're making this very difficult to say no to." "That's the idea." She should think about it, should weigh options, consider consequences, protect herself from the inevitable complications of mixing professional and personal. Instead, she heard herself say, "Yes." Ethan's smile was bright enough to light the whole city. "Yeah? Yeah. On one condition? Another one? We keep it professional, for now. No more hand-holding, no more late-night diners, nothing that Patricia can use against either of us." Lena met his eyes. "I need to prove I earned this position, that it's not about anything except my work." Ethan's expression softened. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. I have to prove it to myself." He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, professional. For now." "For now," Lena agreed. They shook hands across the desk, formal and ridiculous and somehow exactly right. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of research and planning. Lena finished the hotel project, uncovered a fascinating history of the building's connection to the 1906 earthquake, and recommended structural reinforcement before any renovation, and started outlining the new division's protocols. Patricia maintained a careful distance, professional but cool. David Chen proved unexpectedly helpful, connecting Lena with the right departments and running interference when needed. The rest of the office treated her with cautious curiosity, probably trying to figure out if she was Ethan's girlfriend or just someone who'd gotten very lucky. Lena didn't correct either assumption. Let them wonder. She moved into a new apartment in the Sunset District, smaller than the old place but cleaner, safer, with a landlord who actually fixed things when they broke. Ethan had offered to help with the security deposit. Professionally, he'd emphasized, as an advance on her new salary, and Lena had accepted because pride wasn't worth sleeping in a place that had been violated. She didn't see much of him outside work. True to their agreement, they kept things professional. Meetings, emails, the occasional hallway conversation about property assessments and compliance protocols. It was torture, because now Lena knew what his hand felt like holding hers, knew the way his voice softened when he talked about Sophie, knew that he looked at her sometimes like she was something precious and breakable and worth protecting, and she knew she was falling for him in a way that was probably stupid and definitely complicated and absolutely terrifying. Sophie made it worse. The girl had decided Lena was her new favorite person, constantly asking when she was coming over, suggesting activities they could do together, generally making it impossible to maintain professional distance. She's relentless, Ethan said one Friday afternoon, catching Lena in the break room. I'm sorry. Don't be, she's great. Lena poured coffee she didn't need just for something to do with her hands. Smart, funny, completely lacking in social anxiety. Gets that from her mother. I'm a mess at parties. Hard to believe, Mr. Billionaire CEO. Being good at business doesn't mean being good at people. Ethan grabbed a mug, stood too close while reaching for the coffee pot. Most of the time, I'm faking it. Most of the time? Well, not with you. Lena's breath caught. They were standing 6 inches apart in an empty break room, the rest of the office humming beyond the door, and all she wanted was to close that distance and damn the consequences. Instead, she stepped back. Professional, remember? Right, professional. Ethan's jaw tightened. How long are we doing this? I don't know. Until it doesn't feel like I'm getting special treatment? Until Patricia stops looking at me like I'm a bomb about to explode? What if I don't care what Patricia thinks? You should care. She's been with you since the beginning. She's protecting your interests. My interests are my decision. Ethan set down his mug with more force than necessary. And right now, my interests include dinner tonight, with you, and Sophie. And probably pizza, because that's all Sophie ever wants on Fridays. Ethan, as colleagues, professional colleagues who happen to enjoy pizza. His eyes were challenging, almost desperate. Unless you're going to tell me we can't even be friends. Lena knew what she should say, knew that dinner with Ethan and Sophie was a line crossed, a boundary violated, the beginning of something that couldn't be undone. She said yes anyway. Sophie answered the door, already talking. Lena, Dad said you like pepperoni, but I got half pepperoni and half Hawaiian just in case, because some people think pineapple on pizza is gross, but those people are wrong. And also we're watching a movie, but you can pick because Dad always picks boring documentaries, and I want to watch something with explosions or maybe magic. Sophie, breathe, Ethan called from somewhere deeper in the house. The girl grinned, grabbed Lena's hand, pulled her inside. The house was beautiful, of course it was, but also surprisingly lived in. Toys scattered across the floor, art projects covering the fridge, a general chaos that spoke of actual life happening rather than magazine-perfect staging. Come see my room, Sophie dragged Lena toward the stairs. I have a rock collection and also a butterfly I found that's dead but really pretty, and Dad said I could keep it if I promised not to touch it with my bare hands because diseases. Lena let herself be pulled along, catching Ethan's amused expression as they passed the kitchen. Sophie's room was exactly what Lena expected. Explosion of color and energy, walls covered with drawings and posters, a desk piled with books and science kits, and what looked like the beginnings of another volcano. This one's going to be better, Sophie explained, pointing at the papier-mâché disaster. I'm adding a whole village at the base, so when it erupts, you can see the destruction. Dark, Lena said. Science is dark sometimes. People die in natural disasters. Fair enough. They spent 20 minutes looking at Sophie's collections, rocks organized by type, pressed flowers in a photo album, drawings that showed genuine talent. Then Ethan called them down for pizza, and they ate in the living room while Sophie debated the merits of various animated movies. They settled on something with dragons. Lena sat on one end of the couch, Ethan on the other, Sophie sprawled between them with her head on Lena's lap and her feet in her father's. Halfway through the movie, Sophie fell asleep. She always does this, Ethan whispered. Gets excited about movie night, passes out 20 minutes in. It's cute. It's exhausting. But his voice was fond. He carefully extracted himself from Sophie's feet, gestured for Lena to stay put. I'll get her to bed. Don't move. He scooped up his daughter with the ease of practice, carried her out of the room. Lena heard footsteps on the stairs, the soft murmur of Ethan's voice reading bedtime stories, then silence. She should leave. Should call a car, go back to her apartment, maintain the distance they'd agreed on. Instead, she waited. Ethan came back down 20 minutes later, found her still on the couch. She wanted 3 stories and a glass of water and a promise that you'd come back next week, he said, settling onto the opposite end of the couch. I told her we'd see. You can tell her yes. Can I? Lena looked at him, this man who'd defended her, hired her, given her chances she didn't deserve, who looked at his daughter like she hung the moon and looked at Lena like she might do the same. I'm terrible at professional distance, she admitted. Me too. and I'm probably going to screw this up. Whatever this is, we'll screw it up together. Sophie deserves better than her father's messy attempt at dating his employee. Sophie deserves a father who's happy, who takes chances, who shows her that sometimes the rules are worth breaking for the right person. Ethan slid closer, not quite touching, but near enough that Lena could feel the heat of him. Are you the right person, Lena? Her heart was hammering. I don't know. Maybe. Probably not, but he kissed her. It was soft, tentative, a question rather than a demand. Lena froze for half a second, her brain cataloging all the reasons this was a terrible idea. Then she kissed him back. It was like falling and flying at the same time, terrifying and necessary. Ethan's hand cupped her face, gentle and sure, and Lena felt something in her chest crack open, all the walls she'd built to survive suddenly unnecessary. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. Still want to keep it professional? He whispered. Absolutely not. He laughed, the sound rough and relieved. Good, because I've been going crazy. Me too. They sat there for a long moment, wrapped up in each other, the movie still playing on mute behind them. This is going to be complicated, Lena said finally. I know. Patricia's going to lose her mind. She'll survive. And if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out, but at least we tried. Ethan pulled back enough to meet her eyes. I'd rather risk everything and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. Lena kissed him again, slower this time, trying to pour everything she couldn't say into the contact. Thank you. I'm scared. Please don't hurt me. I might be falling in love with you. When they finally broke apart, Ethan was smiling. Stay, he said. I should go home. Stay. We'll have breakfast with Sophie. We'll figure out how to tell Patricia without her strangling both of us. We'll make this work. His thumb brushed her cheek. Please. Lena knew all the reasons she should say no. Knew this was too fast, too risky, too everything. She said yes anyway. Patricia found out Monday morning when she walked into Ethan's office and found Lena there, both of them laughing over coffee and looking distinctly rumpled in a way that suggested weekend activities that weren't work-related. To her credit, Patricia didn't scream. She closed the door very carefully, sat down in the chair across from Ethan's desk, and said, You've got to be kidding me. It's not what it looks like, Ethan started. It's exactly what it looks like. You're sleeping with an employee. I'm dating someone I care about who happens to work here. Same thing, legally speaking. Patricia turned to Lena. And you. I warned you. I specifically told you to stay away from his personal life. I know, Lena said quietly. And I tried. But what? You couldn't resist the billionaire's charm? You saw an opportunity and took it? Patricia. Ethan's voice went hard. That's enough. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, this is a disaster waiting to happen. What happens when you break up? When she sues for wrongful termination or harassment? When the board finds out and demands explanations? Then I'll explain that I'm an adult making adult decisions about my personal life. Your personal life affects this company. Everything you do affects this company. Patricia's voice cracked slightly. I've spent 15 years protecting you, Ethan, protecting what we built. And you're throwing it away for someone who makes me happy. Ethan leaned forward. When was the last time you saw me happy, Patricia? Actually happy, not just going through the motions? Patricia was quiet. I care about this company, but I care about more than just the company. Ethan reached for Lena's hand, and I'm done apologizing for that. The silence stretched out, heavy with things no one wanted to say. Finally, Patricia stood. Fine. Date her, marry her, do whatever you want. But the second this impacts the business, the second there's a lawsuit or a scandal or anything that threatens what we've built, I'm out. Clear? Crystal, Ethan said. Patricia left without another word. Lena exhaled slowly. That went well. She'll get over it, eventually. Ethan squeezed her hand. You okay? Terrified, but okay. Yeah, me too. They sat there holding hands across the desk like teenagers, while the business of the day hummed around them. And for the first time in longer than Lena could remember, she felt like maybe, possibly, everything might actually work out. The feeling lasted exactly 3 hours. Then Vanessa Laurent walked into Lena's office with an envelope and an expression that made Lena's blood run cold. "We need to talk," Vanessa said, closing the door behind her. "Right now." Lena's hand moved toward her phone, but Vanessa shook her head. "Don't. This isn't a threat. It's—" She set the envelope on Lena's desk with careful precision. "It's something you need to see. If this is another attempt to intimidate me—" "It's not!" Vanessa pulled out the chair across from Lena, sat down without invitation. She looked different than she had at the Velvet Harbor, at their last confrontation. Smaller somehow, despite the expensive clothes and perfect hair. Tired. "I didn't come here to fight with you, Lena. I came to finish this." Lena stared at the envelope. "Finish what?" "The truth. The parts I didn't tell you before." Vanessa's hands were clasped in her lap, knuckles white. "You were right about the lawsuit, about Maria Torres, about Richard Laurent buying my silence. You just didn't know what he was buying my silence about." Something in Vanessa's voice made Lena's skin prickle. She reached for the envelope, hesitated. "What's in here? Proof, documentation, everything you'd need to destroy Richard Laurent completely." Vanessa's smile was bitter. "Everything I should have released 20 years ago, but was too scared to use." Lena opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were photographs, inspection reports, internal memos from Laurent Properties discussing cost-saving measures that included skipping lead paint remediation, ignoring mold problems, falsifying safety certificates, dozens of violations across multiple properties, all swept under the rug, all prioritizing profit over people. And at the bottom, a handwritten letter. Lena recognized the handwriting from the photo album. Linda Vale's careful script, dated March 2006. She read it twice before the words fully registered. "Your mother witnessed this," Lena said quietly. "All of it. She tried to report it, and he threatened her." "He did more than threaten her." Vanessa's voice was flat, emotionless. "He destroyed her. Got her blacklisted from every property management company in Nevada. Made sure she couldn't work, couldn't provide for her daughters. We were going to lose everything. Our apartment, our car, whatever pathetic stability we had left after my father died. So she made a deal." "So I made a deal." Vanessa met Lena's eyes. "My mother wanted to fight, wanted to take the documentation to lawyers, to the press, to anyone who would listen. But I was 17 and terrified, and I knew how this story ended. Richard Laurent had money and power, and we had nothing. We'd lose. We'd always lose." "You were a kid." "I was old enough to know better, old enough to choose money over justice." Vanessa's laugh was hollow. "Richard offered to adopt me, give me everything Cassidy Vale would never have. Education, connections, a future that didn't involve waitressing at truck stops and marrying whoever would have me. All I had to do was convince my mother to take a settlement, sign the NDAs, and forget everything she'd seen." Lena felt sick. "And she did. She did. Because I begged her to. Because I told her it was the smart choice, the safe choice, the only choice that let us survive." Vanessa's hands twisted together. "I became Vanessa Laurent. My mother took her settlement money and moved to Arizona and pretended her daughter had died instead of just sold her soul. And Maria Torres lived with brain damage because Richard Laurent couldn't be bothered to spend money keeping children safe." The silence in the office was suffocating. "Why are you telling me this?" Lena asked. "Why now?" "Because you're not going to let it go. I see it in your eyes, that thing I used to have before I buried it so deep I forgot it existed. That need for justice, for things to be right." Vanessa gestured at the envelope. "So here, take it. Use it. Destroy Richard Laurent the way I should have done 20 years ago. This would destroy you too. I know. Everything you've built, your entire identity, is built on lies and blood money and a 17-year-old's cowardice." Vanessa stood, smoothed her skirt with hands that trembled slightly. "I'm tired, Lena. Tired of pretending to be someone I'm not. Tired of looking at myself in the mirror and seeing Cassidy Vale staring back, asking why I let her die for a trust fund and a fancy address." Lena looked at the documents, at the evidence that could topple one of San Francisco's most powerful men. That could also destroy an entire family, shatter a daughter's life, create ripples that would hurt people who had nothing to do with Richard Laurent's crimes. What about Catherine Laurent? She didn't do anything wrong. Didn't she? Vanessa's voice was sharp. She knew. Maybe not the details, but she knew Richard cut corners, knew the properties were dangerous, chose to look the other way because addressing it would mean less money, fewer galas, a smaller mansion. Everyone in that family is complicit, Lena, including me. You were 17. Stop making excuses for me. Vanessa's composure cracked. I was 17, not stupid. I knew what I was choosing. I knew people had been hurt and would keep being hurt, and I chose myself anyway. That's not innocence. That's selfishness. And I've lived with it every single day since. She walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle. Do what you want with those documents. Expose Richard, protect the Lawrence, burn everything to the ground. I don't care anymore. She looked back one last time. But know this, whatever you choose, you'll have to live with it. The same way I've lived with my choices. And some nights that weight is going to be crushing. Then she was gone, leaving Lena alone with evidence that could change everything, and no idea what to do with it. Ethan listened to the whole story without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. They were in his office, door closed, the late afternoon sun slanting through the windows. Lena had spread the documents across his desk. Photographs, memos, Linda Vale's devastating letter. This is bad, Ethan said finally. This is career-ending, potentially criminal bad. I know. Richard Laurent could go to prison. At minimum, he'll lose everything. The company, his reputation, probably his marriage. Ethan picked up one of the inspection reports, scanned it with the eye of someone who understood real estate liability. These violations are egregious. They knew the properties were dangerous and did nothing. People got sick, got hurt, maybe even died because of his negligence. So we release it. Lena's voice sounded steadier than she felt. We give it to journalists, to lawyers, to anyone who can make sure he faces consequences. And Vanessa? She knew what she was giving me. She's made her peace with it. Has she? Ethan set down the report. Or is she self-destructing because she can't live with the guilt anymore? The question hit Lena harder than she expected. She thought about Vanessa's face, that brittle desperation barely hidden beneath the designer clothes and perfect makeup. A woman who'd spent 20 years running from herself. Does it matter? Lena asked. If the outcome is justice, does it matter why she's finally telling the truth? It matters if we're using a troubled woman's breakdown to pursue a vendetta. This isn't a vendetta, this is accountability. Is it? Ethan leaned back in his chair. Because from here, it looks like you're about to destroy an entire family, including a woman who was 17 years old when she made a terrified choice, to prove a point about power and justice. Lena felt heat rise in her face. That's not fair. Isn't it? I'm not saying Richard Laurent doesn't deserve consequences. He absolutely does. But Vanessa? She's already been punished. She spent 2 decades living a lie, hating herself, becoming someone she doesn't recognize. Ethan's voice softened. At some point, revenge becomes just another form of cruelty. So what, we do nothing? We let Richard Laurent keep his empire, his reputation, his life, while people like Maria Torres live with the consequences of his greed? No. We find another way. There is no other way. There's always another way. Ethan pulled out his phone. Let me make some calls. The meeting happened 3 days later in a conference room that probably cost more per hour than Lena used to make in a week. Richard Laurent sat at one end of the table, flanked by lawyers who looked like they'd been born in 3-piece suits. He was older than Lena expected. Mid-70s, thick white hair, the kind of deeply tanned face that suggested yacht clubs and golf courses. He looked at her the way someone might look at an insect that had wandered into their champagne. Ethan sat beside Lena, David Chen on his other side with a briefcase full of documentation. Across from them, Patricia Moore looked like she wanted to be literally anywhere else. Let's make this quick, Richard said, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone used to being obeyed. I have a dinner engagement at 7. This won't take long, Ethan said. He slid a folder across the table. Inside, you'll find copies of inspection reports, internal memos, and testimony from your former property manager, Linda Vale, documenting 2 decades of building code violations, safety negligence, and fraud. Richard didn't open the folder. I assume this is leading somewhere? It's leading to you signing these papers. Ethan produced a second folder, A settlement agreement establishing a compensation fund for all tenants affected by violations at Laurent Properties between 2000 and 2010. $50 million, distributed by an independent mediator, no NDAs required. One of Richard's lawyers picked up the second folder, scanned it quickly. His expression didn't change, but Lena saw him swallow hard. Ridiculous, Richard said. I'm not signing anything based on 2-decade-old allegations from a disgruntled former employee. Then we'll release the documentation publicly. Let journalists, prosecutors, and civil attorneys decide if the allegations have merit. Ethan's voice was calm, almost pleasant. I'm told the statute of limitations on criminal negligence in cases involving injury to minors is quite generous, and several of your former tenants would be very interested in discussing their experiences. You're bluffing, am I? Ethan pulled out his phone, pulled up a contact. This is the number for Sarah Chen at the San Francisco Chronicle. Investigative journalist, specializes in corporate malfeasance. I can have her here in 20 minutes. Richard's jaw tightened. His lawyers were whispering urgently, pages rustling. Even if these allegations were true, which I'm not conceding, $50 million is absurd. Property management involves complex decisions. Sometimes violations occur despite best efforts. Cut the corporate speak, Lena said quietly. You knew those buildings were poisoning children. You knew, and you did nothing because fixing it would cost money. Richard looked at her properly for the first time. And you are? Someone who reads property histories for a living. Someone who knows exactly how many corners you cut, how many inspectors you bribed, how many families you destroyed. Lena leaned forward. Someone who's done being polite about it. Mr. Laurent, one of his lawyers interjected, perhaps we should discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss. Richard stood. I'm not signing anything. Release your documentation, call your journalist, do whatever you think will hurt me. I have lawyers who will bury you in litigation for years. You also have a daughter, Ethan said. Richard froze. Vanessa Laurent, adopted in 2006. Sweet girl, from what I hear. Very protective of the family reputation. Ethan's voice remained conversational. I wonder how she'd feel knowing this documentation exists, knowing that her entire identity is based on covering up your crimes. You leave Vanessa out of this, gladly. Sign the papers, establish the fund, and Vanessa's name never comes up. We'll leave out anything connecting her to the violations, frame it as a general settlement addressing historical oversights. Ethan met Richard's eyes. But if you force us to go public, we tell the whole story, including how you adopted your property manager's teenage daughter to ensure her silence. The color drained from Richard's face. That's a lie. Is it? Because we have documentation suggesting otherwise. Letters, settlement agreements, NDAs signed by Linda Vale, the same month you filed adoption papers. Ethan tapped the folder. I'm sure Vanessa would love to see them. Richard's hands clenched on the back of his chair. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the whisper of lawyers flipping through papers, calculating damages, weighing options. 20 million, Richard said finally. And everyone signs NDAs. 40 million. No NDAs. Victims shouldn't have to hide what happened to them. 30. And we issue a joint statement saying this settlement addresses unintentional oversights, not criminal negligence. 40. And you retire from Laurent Properties within 6 months. Hand control to someone who won't prioritize profit over people's lives. Richard's face went purple. Absolutely not. That company is my legacy. Then it dies with your reputation. Ethan stood, started gathering papers. We're done here. Lena, call Miss Chen. Wait. Richard's voice cracked slightly. 40 million. I retire. But Vanessa stays out of this completely. Her name, her connection to the violations, all of it buried. Ethan looked at Lena. She thought about Vanessa's face when she'd handed over the envelope. That exhausted desperation, that need for the weight to finally lift. Thought about Cassidy Vale, 17 years old and terrified, making a choice that would haunt her for 20 years. Agreed, Lena said. Vanessa's name stays out of it. Richard's shoulders sagged. He looked at his lawyers, who were already pulling out pens. Draft it, he told them quietly. I'll sign. Accept. The news broke 2 weeks later. Laurent Properties founder Richard Laurent was stepping down following a $40 million settlement addressing historical building code violations. The settlement would establish a compensation fund for affected tenants, distributed by an independent mediator. No criminal charges were filed, though the settlement agreement included provisions for ongoing monitoring and compliance. Richard released a statement expressing regret for oversights that occurred during a period of rapid expansion and committing to ensuring all affected families receive appropriate compensation. Vanessa Laurent was never mentioned. The story made headlines for 3 days before being eclipsed by a celebrity divorce and a tech company scandal. San Francisco moved on, the way it always did. Lena watched it unfold from her new office, bigger now, with windows that overlooked the bay, and felt something complicated settle in her chest. Not satisfaction exactly, not quite peace, but maybe the beginning of both. "You okay?" Ethan appeared in her doorway, coffee in hand. "I don't know." Lena turned away from the window. "I keep thinking about all the things we didn't expose. The full truth about Vanessa, the extent of Richard's negligence, the fact that he's essentially buying his way out of consequences. He's losing his company and $40 million. That's not nothing. It's not enough. It never is." Ethan set the coffee on her desk. "Justice isn't about perfect outcomes, Lena. It's about doing the most good with the tools you have. Those families are getting compensation they never would have seen otherwise. Richard Laurent's career is over. The buildings are being inspected and remediated. That's more than existed 3 weeks ago. Still feels incomplete. Most things are." Ethan perched on the edge of her desk. "We did good work here. Don't diminish that because it wasn't perfect." Lena picked up the coffee, made exactly the way she liked it, because Ethan had somehow memorized her preferences after watching her drink it twice, and took a sip. "Thank you," she said, "for helping with this. For not judging me when I wanted to burn everything down. I get the impulse. I've wanted to burn things down more times than I can count." Ethan's smile was soft. "But I've learned that sometimes building something better is more satisfying than destroying what's broken." "When did you get so wise?" "Sophie's bedtime philosophy sessions. Last night she explained that revenge is just anger looking for a place to live rent-free in your head." He laughed. "I'm pretty sure she was quoting some cartoon, but the point stands." Lena found herself smiling despite everything. "She's a smart kid. Takes after her parents. Both of them." Ethan's expression shifted, became more serious. "Speaking of Sophie, she's been asking when you're coming to dinner again." "I was there 3 nights ago." "Yeah, and now she's decided you're a permanent fixture. Started setting a place for you at the table automatically." He rubbed the back of his neck. "Which brings me to something I wanted to talk about." Lena's stomach flipped. "That sounds ominous." "It's not. At least I hope it's not." Ethan took a breath. "I know we've only been dating for a few weeks. I know it's fast, probably too fast by any reasonable standard. But Sophie loves you. I love—" He stopped, corrected himself. "I care about you deeply, and I was thinking maybe you could move in with us." The words hung in the air. Lena stared at him, her brain struggling to process. "Move in, with you and Sophie. I know it's a lot, and if you need time to think about it, or if you're not ready, I completely understand." "Ethan," he stopped talking. "I'm still figuring out how to date someone who has a child. I'm still learning how to navigate being your employee and your girlfriend without Patricia having a stroke. I'm still—" Lena gestured helplessly. "I'm still me. Messy and complicated and probably going to screw this up in new and creative ways." "I know. I'm counting on it." "Then you're an idiot." "Probably." Ethan reached for her hand. "But I'm an idiot who wants to wake up next to you, who wants Sophie to have someone who challenges her and encourages her and treats her like an actual person instead of a cute accessory, who wants to build something real with you, even if it's complicated and messy." Lena felt tears prick her eyes, unexpected and embarrassing. "What if it doesn't work?" "Then it doesn't work. But I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering." Ethan's thumb brushed across her knuckles. "You taught me that. You taught me that some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are bad." "I didn't teach you anything. I just stumbled into your life and caused chaos." "You caused change. There's a difference." Lena looked at their joined hands, at this man who'd seen her at her worst, and somehow decided she was worth keeping. Thought about Sophie and her volcano projects and her unfiltered honesty. Thought about the possibility of something stable, something good, something that didn't require constant fighting just to survive. "Okay," she whispered. Okay? Okay, I'll move in. On one condition. Ethan laughed, the sound relieved and joyful. There's always a condition with you. I get to help Sophie with her earthquake project because if we're doing this, I'm all in. Science fairs, bedtime stories, the whole terrifying package. Deal! Ethan pulled her into a kiss that tasted like coffee and promises and new beginnings. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Patricia's voice came from the doorway. I'm choosing to believe I didn't just witness that. They jumped apart like guilty teenagers. Patricia stood there with a folder, her expression carefully neutral. The quarterly reports are ready for review, and HR needs Lena to sign some updated employment contracts given the change in her position and apparently her living situation. You heard that, Lena said. The whole office heard that. Your door is open. Patricia's lips twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. Congratulations, I suppose. Try not to make me regret not quitting when I had the chance. She left before either of them could respond. Did she just approve? Lena asked. I think that's as close as Patricia gets to approval. Ethan was grinning. She didn't threaten to quit or mention lawsuits. That's basically a blessing. Your standards are concerning. My standards got me you. I'm satisfied. The first letter arrived a month later. It came to Caldwell Properties, addressed to Lena Brooks in careful handwriting she didn't recognize. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Thank you for what you did. For my daughter, for my family, for all of us who thought no one cared. The compensation fund is helping with Maria's medical expenses and allowing me to cut back my hours to spend more time with her. I don't know who you are or why you fought for us, but please know it mattered. You mattered. The letter was signed by Elena Torres, Maria's mother. Lena read it 3 times, her vision blurring. More letters came over the following weeks. Former tenants of Laurent Properties, families who'd suffered health problems and financial devastation, people who'd given up on ever seeing justice. The compensation fund was changing their lives in small but significant ways, paying medical bills, funding education, providing cushion for emergencies. It wasn't enough. Would never be enough to undo the damage Richard Laurent had caused. But it was something. Lena kept the letters in a folder in her desk drawer. On bad days, when Patricia gave her grief about procedural changes, when research hit dead ends, when imposter syndrome whispered that she didn't deserve any of this, she read them and remembered why the work mattered. Sophie's earthquake project won first place at the science fair. Lena and Ethan stood in the back of the gymnasium watching their daughter, because Sophie had started calling Lena her bonus mom, and Lena had cried for an hour when it first happened, explained fault lines and seismic waves to a judge who looked genuinely impressed. She's going to be a scientist, Ethan said, his arm around Lena's waist, or an engineer, or possibly the president. She's going to be whatever she wants. Lena leaned into him, letting herself enjoy the simple pleasure of belonging somewhere. Because she's brilliant and stubborn and completely fearless. Gets that from you. She got it from her mother. I'm just trying not to screw it up. You're not screwing it up. Ethan paused, seemed to be searching for words. You're exactly what she needs. What we both need. Sophie finished her presentation to enthusiastic applause, looked over at them, and beamed. She waved frantically, nearly knocking over her carefully constructed model of the San Andreas Fault. Lena waved back, her heart so full it hurt. Later that night, after Sophie had gone to bed clutching her first-place ribbon and demanding pancakes for breakfast to celebrate, Lena and Ethan sat on the back porch with wine and the kind of comfortable silence that came from knowing someone well. I saw Vanessa today, Lena said quietly. Ethan turned to look at her. Yeah? At a coffee shop downtown. She was alone reading a book. She looked... Lena searched for the right word. Different, lighter, maybe. Like she'd put down something heavy. Did you talk to her? No, I almost did, but then I thought about everything that happened, everything she lost, and I didn't know what to say. Lena took a sip of wine. Do you think I did the right thing? Protecting her identity, letting her stay Vanessa Laurent instead of being exposed as Cassidy Vale? I think you gave her a choice she didn't have before. That's all anyone can do. She gave me the evidence. She wanted it all to come out. She wanted the guilt to stop. There's a difference. Ethan set down his wine glass. You could have destroyed her completely. used her confession to maximize the damage to Richard Laurent. But you didn't. You found a way to get justice for the victims without making Vanessa into another casualty. That takes wisdom, Lena, and compassion. Or cowardice. Maybe I just didn't have the stomach for total war. There's nothing cowardly about choosing mercy. Lena thought about that. About Cassidy Vale at 17, terrified and desperate, making a choice that would haunt her for 20 years. About Vanessa Laurent at 28, finally finding the courage to hand over the evidence that could free her from the lie. About how easy it would have been to weaponize that evidence, to destroy everything Vanessa had built and call it justice. I think some people deserve second chances, Lena said finally. Even people who made terrible choices, even people who hurt others. Because if we don't believe in redemption, what's the point of any of this? Ethan pulled her closer. When did you get so wise? Sophie's bedtime philosophy sessions. She told me last night that holding grudges is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Pretty sure that's an actual quote, not a cartoon. Either way, she's right. Lena leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder, looked up at the stars barely visible through San Francisco's light pollution. I spent so long being angry, at the world, at Vanessa, at everyone who had what I didn't, and the anger didn't change anything except make me miserable. You weren't miserable. You were fighting. I was surviving. There's a difference. She laced her fingers through his. Now I'm living, and it's terrifying and wonderful and nothing like I expected. Good terrifying or bad terrifying? Good. Mostly. Lena smiled. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for you to realize you made a mistake, for Sophie to decide she doesn't actually like having me around, for Patricia to finally snap and murder us both. Patricia's warming up to you. She only threatened to fire you once this week. That's progress. And Sophie adores you, and I... Ethan paused, turned to face her properly. I love you, Lena. I've been trying to find the right time to say it, waiting for some perfect moment, but there's never a perfect moment. So I'm just saying it now, on our porch, with cheap wine and questionable stars. I love you. Lena felt her breath catch. Even though I'm messy and complicated and prone to picking fights with billionaires? Especially because of that. Ethan's smile was soft. You make me better. You make Sophie better. You make everything better just by being in it. That's a lot of pressure. Then let me help carry it. Lena kissed him, trying to pour everything she felt into the contact. All the fear and hope and desperate gratitude for this man who'd seen her at her worst and decided she was worth fighting for. I love you too, she whispered against his lips. Even though you're a workaholic with boundary issues and a daughter who thinks volcanoes are appropriate dinner conversation. She gets that from you. She absolutely does not. I'm team earthquakes all the way. Ethan laughed, the sound bright and free, and pulled her closer. Inside the house, Sophie's nightlight glowed in the second-floor window. Their daughter, sleeping peacefully, dreaming of tectonic plates and scientific glory. Tomorrow there would be pancakes and celebration and the normal chaos of family life. But tonight, there was just this. Two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their separate struggles, who'd chosen to build something together, despite all the reasons it shouldn't work. It wasn't perfect. Lena still had nightmares about her apartment being violated, about losing everything again. Ethan still worked too many hours and worried too much about failing Sophie. Patricia still made pointed comments about professional boundaries and HR compliance. But it was real. Messy and complicated and absolutely real. And that, Lena decided, was enough. More than enough. It was everything. 6 months later, Lena received a package with no return address. Inside was a photo album. Not the one she'd stolen from the library. That had been returned, anonymously donated back to the archives where it belonged. This was new, leather-bound, expensive. She opened it carefully. The first page showed a young girl in a beauty pageant sash, smiling too hard at the camera. Cassidy Vale, Junior Miss Nevada, trying so desperately to be something more than what she was. The second page showed the same girl at 17, standing between two people who must have been Richard and Catherine Laurent. She looked scared and hopeful and impossibly young. The following pages tracked Vanessa Laurent's evolution. College graduation, charity events, the carefully constructed life of a billionaire's daughter. And then, tucked into the back, a recent photo. A woman sitting alone in a coffee shop, no makeup, hair pulled back, reading a book. She looked tired, but peaceful, like she'd finally stopped running. On the back of the photo, in careful handwriting, "Thank you for letting me choose who I want to become." See, Lena stared at that single letter for a long time. Not Vanessa, not Cassidy, just C. Someone in between, someone new, someone finally free to figure out who she was beyond the lies and the guilt and the weight of choices made by a terrified teenager. Lena closed the album and put it in her desk drawer, next to the letters from the families helped by the compensation fund. Some stories didn't have neat endings. Some people couldn't be saved, only given the chance to save themselves. Some justice was imperfect, incomplete, frustratingly human. But it was better than nothing, and sometimes better than nothing was enough to build a life on. Outside her office, she heard Sophie's voice in the hallway. Ethan had started bringing her to the office after school sometimes, letting her do homework in the conference room while he finished meetings. Patricia pretended to be annoyed, but Lena had caught her helping Sophie with math problems more than once. "Lena!" Sophie burst through the door, backpack bouncing. "Dad said we're getting Thai food for dinner and I get to pick the movie, and he promised it won't be another documentary about buildings." "Sounds perfect," Lena said, standing. "Are you done working? Because I have a new idea for the next science fair, and it involves chemicals. And Dad said I had to ask you first because he's scared I'll blow something up." "Will you blow something up?" "Probably not. Maybe a little," Sophie grinned. "But it'll be educational." Lena looked at this fierce, brilliant child who'd somehow decided she was worth loving. At Ethan appearing in the doorway with that soft smile he saved for moments when he thought no one was watching. At the office she'd earned and the work that mattered and the life she'd built from the ruins of losing everything. "Let's go home," she said, "and you can tell me all about these chemicals that are probably going to give your father a heart attack." Sophie grabbed her hand, already talking a mile a minute about chemical reactions and controlled explosions, and how Mr. Henderson had said her idea was ambitious, which was teacher code for possibly dangerous. Ethan fell into step beside them, his hand finding Lena's free one. And as they walked out of the building into the San Francisco evening, Lena realized something that had been slowly building for months, something she'd been too scared to acknowledge. She was happy. Not perfectly happy, not without problems or fears or the occasional 3 a.m. panic about everything that could still go wrong. But genuinely, messily, impossibly happy. She'd started this journey as a waitress with nothing to lose, fighting back against injustice with desperate courage and questionable judgment. She'd made mistakes, hurt people, learned hard lessons about the difference between revenge and justice. And she'd ended up here, with a family she didn't expect, work that mattered, and the kind of love that scared her precisely because losing it would hurt so much. Some people might say she'd gotten lucky. That stumbling into Ethan Caldwell's life, catching his attention, winning over his daughter, that was all just chance, coincidence, the universe throwing her a bone after years of struggle. But Lena knew better. Luck was showing up every day, doing the work, choosing kindness over bitterness, even when bitterness felt safer. Luck was accepting help when it was offered, taking risks on people who saw value in you, building something new instead of just destroying what was broken. Luck was choosing to live instead of just survive. And if that was luck, then Lena would take it, would hold on to it with both hands and refuse to let go, even when things got hard, even when fear whispered that she didn't deserve it. Because the truth was, nobody deserved anything. Life just happened, messy and unfair, and occasionally miraculous. The only choice was what you did with it. So Lena chose this. Chose Sophie's hand in hers and Ethan's smile and the future they were building together, imperfect and uncertain and absolutely worth fighting for. The waitress who'd fought back against a billionaire had found something better than revenge. She'd found home.